I'd like to remind everybody, in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice, other than the public forum section, this meeting will be live streamed. The acknowledgement of country and prayer of council and affirmation will be read by the Reverend David Morgan of St Mark's Anglican Church. If you could all be upstanding.
Well, good evening, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Thank you for the privilege to come and share with you. Before we begin proceedings, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and their ancestors past and present, the Karbrugal clan of the Darug Nation. We also acknowledge that this land was accessed by peoples of the Darawal and Darug nations. And at this point, we affirm our hope and dedication to the good government of our city and the well-being of all of Liverpool's residents, no matter their race or creed. Tonight, we affirm our hope for sound decision-making by Council, which will improve the quality of life in our city. We express our expectations and best wishes for Australia, our nation's future, the Mayor, councillors and staff of Council, and all those associated with good government in Liverpool. And Heavenly Father, we thank you for the elected councillors who meet here tonight. We thank you for the skill that you have given them and the wisdom. We bring before you the matters before them, and we ask that you will help them to debate and make decisions with great wisdom and with great compassion for the good of all people who live in this part of our land. We pray for your help in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. If you'll all stay upstanding for the National Anthem.
Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, all beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains that let us sing, advance Australia fair. Beneath the radiant Southern Cross, we'll toil with hearts and hands to make this Commonwealth of ours renowned of all the lands. For those who've come across the seas with boundless plains to share, with courage let us all combine to advance Australia fair. In joyful strains that let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Thank you, everybody. Be seated. I doubt we have any apologies. It looks like we have everybody present. Do we have any condolences? No. Confirmation of the previous minutes.
Move that way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Shelton. Seconded, Councillor Carney. I'll put it. Those in favour? Those against? Declare it carried. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor.
I've got pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Pecuniary is EGRO 01 and Info 01. Myself and immediate family members live and have property in the area these reports relate to. That's pecuniary, I'll be leaving. Non-pecuniary in EGRO 02, QWN 21 and 24. Same reason, live in the area. I don't believe these are significant and I'll remain.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Can I declare a conflict in Conf 04? It's non-pecuniary, non-significant, as one of the newly appointed members is known to me.
Thank you. Any others?
Yep.
Councillor Haggerty.
Let me find the number. Conf something.
Conf something.
Conf 02. So I've through my work I've had dealings with one of the landowners. So I'll non-pecuniary, non-significant, and I'll leave the room.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I also have two declarations of interest to make. My first one is EGRO 01. This is a pecuniary interest, Madam Mayor. My husband owns and runs a consultancy firm, and his services have been employed by a local school in the area. So I won't be voting on that. That's pecuniary. And my second one is Conf 02.
Can I just stop you? Are you going to stay in the room or?
For which, sorry?
For the pecuniary interest item?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm not going to vote, but I'm very interested, to hear the debate. If that's not allowed, I'm happy to leave. But
I think it'd be better if you
okay,
did.
that's fine.
Thank you. The second one?
Yep, the second one is Confo 2. One of those landowners has actually provided professional services to myself, my children, my family. It's less than significant. It's non-pecuniary, so I will be remaining in the room and I will be voting on it also.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Anybody else?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. In relation to item CEO 01, I sit on the same committee as the individuals there involved. I had a role in relation to their selection, and we vote from time to time in relation to various issues. Non-pecuniary, less than significant. I don't intend to leave the room. Thank you.
Any others? Okay, George will make sure you get the forms. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by Mr John Anderson, President of the Raid Moorebank Inc. Wattle Grove, and he will address the Council on committee minutes. The agenda is Merrill Minute. On the weekend of the 20th of March, a severe weather event inundated the local government area, causing widespread flooding, which had a major impact on road networks and drainage levels. Working around the clock from Saturday the 20th of March, Council's city presentation team proactively patrolled the local government area, attending to numerous emergency call-outs and managing flash flooding locations, clearing blocked drains and channels, redirecting rapids away from homes, clearing debris and making sure the roads were safe, and executing traffic control management plans with road closures and detours. Our recovery efforts now focus on an assessment of all council's areas and facilities as flash flooding areas recede. Our teams have moved from immediate response mode to an assessment of recovery phase. All areas will be assessed to determine the damage, and this will provide visibility of risk and priorities to be addressed. The City Council's presentation team and State Emergency Services, along with other members of the Local Emergency Management Committee, played an important role in providing immediate responses to critical issues impacting on the community and keeping our people safe. Our community is thankful that no community members were evacuated, no homes or lives were lost during this event. I move that the Council acknowledge and thank all staff involved in their diligence and tireless work during the severe weather event, and we write to the Liverpool, New South Wales State Emergency Service and Local Emergency Management Committee and thank them for their service and support in assisting the local community during a severe weather event. I'll put it. Those in favour?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Next item.
Madam Mayor, I have an urgency motion.
What is your urgency motion?
An urgency motion, Madam Mayor, for Council to consider the revised parameters of the intermodal appeal case number 2020-004407. The matter is urgent because a decision of council will affect ongoing costs to the case, and a decision has to be made one way or another for that to proceed.
Can I ask, Councillor, when is the matter appearing before court?
Yes, it's not the matter appearing before court, Madam Mayor, it's the preparation that we'd be charged for if we were to...
So it's preparing for the court case?
Absolutely.
When is the court case?
It's in May, I believe.
Okay, thank you. I believe that it would be better if this was dealt with as a notice of motion at the April meeting. I realise that's 4 weeks away, but it will go fairly quickly. And if this particular group has no cash at this time to proceed, I'll just ask another question. How much cash have we provided to this organisation? CEO?
Madam Mayor, I would need to take that on notice, but I am... Are you having it? Oh, apologies. Mr Hampouris?
Madam Mayor, I'd also be troubled if that number was mentioned in open forum.
Well, it's a public record, Councillor. We've actually moved it as a public record. The amount we provide is on public record. It's not a secret, it's ratepayers' money. Yep. How much have we resolved to?
So, with the CEO, to date, we've actually allocated 198,000, and council resolution. Sorry, and council resolution has allowed staff to through various means to actually exhaust up to 300,000. So there's 100,000 remaining.
So there is a balance. Thank you. It's a toughie.
Madam Mayor, if it is an urgency motion, I would need it to go into the confidential.
Yes, I acknowledge that, but I'm still thinking whether it is urgent or not, Councillor. That's what I'm saying. It's a bit of a toughie. All right, well, for the sake of debate, I will move that it is urgent and it will be moved into confidential part of this council meeting. Thank you. The next item is CEO 01 and it's on page 72.
I move the motion as per the recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Second that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Calienda.
I have a couple of questions, Madam Mayor.
Hold on a moment. And before you... Okay, ask your questions, Councillor.
Madam Mayor, can we just have clarification about the cost for the chair? Is that including or excluding the interstate travel cost, the 3,487?
Councillor, my understanding is that that excludes the travel fees, and I'll ask Mr Van Zyl to confirm that.
Yes, that's correct, councillors.
And my next question was the procedure that has happened for the last 12 months, are they face-to-face or are they online?
We're moving back to face-to-face meetings from the next meeting in April.
And any of the people on the board, on the committee, are any of them interstate?
Our chairperson is currently interstate.
All right.
So under the proposed fee, we won't be paying the interstate travel at this stage.
Yep.
As we progress the implementation of the framework,
then it would be
we will then review that fees.
And the other question is, when is the committee actually selected and how is it selected?
The committee was selected a few years back with a paper that went to council last year. So currently the committee is extended for 1 year with an additional 1 year to bring it after the to bring it in line with the new framework. So the members will be re-elected at the next year. And
how are they elected? Who selects them and who? Is it a vote by council, is it? I can't remember.
Normally it's recommendations by the head of audit, risk and improvement, in consultation with the CEO. and then a paper will go to council with some recommendations in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that information. No, I'm happy with it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other debate? Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item's on page 76 of your book. Hold on, I've got to wait till Councillor Hachidi is out of the room and not seen. He's disappeared. Okay. The recommendations on page 76.
I have some questions, Madam Mayor.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Hart.
This is probably to David Smith, Acting Director. One of my concerns is the rain gardens. And while I have obviously no objections to them, I think they're a great idea. But I think we need to bear in mind that I think they are going to be a significant cost to maintain. Has Council looked at that cost that will be incurred to maintain them? Yes, go on. Thank you.
Mr. Aitar.
Through the CEO, thank you for that question, Councillor. Look, rain gardens has certainly introduced a different way of managing stormwater. It's a significant shift from just pits and pipes to more greener infrastructure. So as a result of that, yes, it is a more maintenance intensive, I guess, if I could call it, way of managing our stormwater infrastructure. As part of the whole shift of water sensitive urban design, we have developed rates and long-term operational and maintenance costs. So we have a good understanding of what the long-term impact of this shift is going to be.
Thank you. So what we're saying is there will probably be a significant cost to the maintenance budget, the city presentation budget for this, I would imagine. I think my personal opinion, the positive effects of this are great. I think it's about time that we made sure that rainwater got to trees and vegetation on the verges. One of my concerns is that if we look at the new Bringelly Road, the 4-lane highway that has recently been constructed, that uses rain gardens there too. And if you look at those, the problem with that is that unfortunately we've got some people who throw rubbish out of windows and sadly it gets trapped in those areas, and there would be a significant cost in our maintenance crew having to walk around and actually physically pick that up, because there's simply no easy other way of doing that. And I remember when we were looking at, with part of the Riverkeeper program, who gave us that information at the time and showed us examples. In Melbourne, for instance, there was that disadvantage, and the same applies if you have them within the CBD. People tend to throw rubbish in them, and again, but as I say, the positive aspects hopefully outweigh the negative costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
I have a couple of
ask
questions.
councillors when they ask a question if they could ask the question and not enter into debate. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Rhodes.
Yes, again, on the same issue that Councillor Hull was talking about, the idea of the stormwater and the collection of the stormwater on the street verge sounds like a good idea. I'm just wondering if that would interfere in any places where we might consider to allow parking on the verge?
Well, that's illegal, but I think the council officer could probably answer that question.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Through the CEO, that has certainly been considered. So there are new cross sections within the DCP that provides for adequate two-way traffic flow, as well as parking on both sides, as well as street trees. So councillors did raise that as an issue a number of months ago in growth areas and the size of streets. So we've spent quite a bit of time there to make sure that new streets that are constructed within the growth areas can actually have parking in parking bays, but not at the expense also of street trees, so that we get that urban cooling effect in those growth areas. Thank you.
And if I may, further questions, Madam Mayor?
Further question?
The parking bays would not give or would they give more parking availability than parking on the verge?
Thank you. Yep, through the CEO. So the parking bays effectively are eating into the verge slightly. So the intention is to have adequate car parking on the side of the road, rather the current situation where people park up against the curb, which reduces the through traffic in that area. So the cross sections that are actually included as an attachment to the council agenda shows how that will actually work. And
if I may, Madam Mayor, did I read that the streetscape rain gardens was in consideration of a double intention? One is of water quality, which is easy and easily understood, but the other intention was as a collection of volume of water that might minimise the amount of detention basins. Did I read that correctly?
Mr. O'Tar.
Through the CEO. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, at a local level, I guess the rain gardens do provide short-term temporary detention, but it's quite different to the larger detention basins, or it does not do away with the larger detention basins in the urban release areas, but it does provide short-term detention so that our stormwater system demand is managed a bit better.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, the volume of water that we would be expected that might be contained in the streetscape rain gardens? We wouldn't have that figure.
No, not.
Would it be possible, or the stormwater collection seems to be through an open drain system? Would it work equally well with a underflow system where there is grass rather than plants? Would it work equally well if that was the way that this was done, so that it would be easier to keep it clean?
Through the CEO, I think the question is I guess directed towards the provision of low flow pipes versus open channels and naturalized creek systems, which is quite a different proposition altogether. And in that regard, we're actually bringing a briefing to councillors at a later date. That requires quite a bit of debate and discussion, and probably outside the scope of the question that you've asked, councillor.
Okay, and I note that the report advises that car widths are 2.5 metres and the road widths have been reduced to 5.5 metres, which permits, a foot and a half in between each passing car. Do the road widths permit the minimum emergency width of a 4.5 normal fire emergency service and a 6 metre for special emergency fire vehicle to have access to all properties at all times, regardless of if there's other cars on the street?
Thank you through the CEO. Mr. Wafey, are you able to pop down and just answer that question from Councillor Rhodes, please?
Through the CEO, a normal vehicle, and for that matter, traffic lane, it's usually 3 metres on a local street. If you go all the way to a freeway, it becomes 3.5. For emergency times, if emergency vehicles need to get through the roadway, yes, you activate emergency systems. That consideration, it's a bit different. When we design in for, say, a bushfire trail, then we use 4 metres. But if you're doing normal road design for a residential street, then 5.5 metres for two-way traffic, it's the standard requirement.
So, just to be clear, then we're saying that a big one, the bigger fire engine, wouldn't be able to access all the streets.
The big fire engines will be able to access all the streets with the configuration of a carriageway width of 9 metres that we're making provision for.
So we'd have to get rid of all the cars and everything like that to get.
We don't necessarily have to get rid of the cars. Like I said, when you've got emergency arrangements, the arrangements are very, very different. But for everyday traffic, the provision of 5.5 meters, it's the width that you'd find on most residential streets with the allocation for on-street parking provision. I'm not sure whether the requirement it's saying, yes, you want us to make the streets any wider.
I'm just questioning the safety issues involved for residents who will one day be living in this area.
The design and the provision of 9 meters, it's the sort of standard that is provided in most residential streets. On this particular exercise, we're starting from a carriageway width of 7.2, and we've heard the concerns that residents were raising, the concerns that council has been raising. That's why the road width is being widened to the 9 meters.
Well, then, on another issue, is there a conflict of purpose and function in saying that the parking bays will be used as a passing lane and parking provision, those two purposes in one-way streets?
They are not conflicting because, the traffic committee, and we do that all the time, if we need to restrict parking for locations where we need the parking bay to be used for through traffic, then that can be done. Say at an intersection, we would restrict parking for a distance, whether it's 10 meters or 15 meters, for the parking bay to be used as a traffic lane.
That concludes my questions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. As I said, we have a motion on page 76.
Happy to move it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Caliander. Is there any opposition? I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Could we get Councillor Ayard and Councillor Chitty back, please? Next item is on page 90.
I'll move that way, Madam Mayor.
I'll second it, Madam Mayor.
We'll just wait for our colleagues to return.
Yeah, I think Councillor Hachidi's got a few
You're enthusiastic, I know. But
things to ask about this one.
So we have a mover and a seconder for the next one, which was Councillor Caliander, was it? And Councillor Rhodes, was it?
Seconded, yes.
Yes, thank you. We'll just wait now. We're on page 90. We have a mover and a seconder. Anybody wish to speak against the motion?
Don't want to speak against, Mayor, but thanks. Good to go?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for the report, which then tells us to receive and note it, which means that there's pretty much, we're not doing anything except noting the report. But I just think we need to actually do something. So is the Director of Planning, there he is, I'm there. Now, we all understand, this can almost be tied into the question with notice when it comes to, and I'm happy to have them discussed at the same time, Mayor, in relation to that. There's a question with notice I've got in there which relates to the aerotropolis zoning as well. The issue we're facing, or people are facing in these growth areas, is you used to have a planning instrument that said you could do all this. You've now got a new planning instrument that says you need to do this, yet there's no sewer, there's no stormwater, there's nothing there. So some people are just sitting on a vacant block of land that they can't do anything with except pay obviously a higher rate of land tax and land rates because, you know, the value has increased. I don't think we can sit here for much longer and tell these people that you just can't do anything. So I think, and thank you again for the report, what is the solution? How can we put forward a solution that actually works? What can we do tonight as a council to ensure moving forward we can have landowners actually use their land for something while they're waiting for Sydney Water, who just delayed some sewer out there for another 5 or 6 years. And obviously we've got to get our stuff in relation to basins and whatnot done. So question to the CEO, which obviously will go then probably through the Director of Planning, what can we do tonight so that we can make life easier for people that are stuck in these zones?
Before you ask that question, I just want some clarity. You want to deal with question 23, question with notice 23 as well as this?
Question 23...
Which is the aerotropic...
is almost the same issue, but then is really, I think I've called it before, a dog's breakfast, where you've got a zoning, you don't have a precinct plan, so...
All right, well, we'll deal with it separately.
All right,
I think.
no
okay.
dramas.
I'll ask the CEO for the correct officer's response.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor, for that question. So on page 99 of the report, we outline what the next steps could be. Given that the Growth Centre SEP is a SEP, it's not an LEP, what we've recommended is if Council does wish to consider temporary use or other temporary type activities on land, that the next step is for us to have further discussions with the Department of Planning to determine if they would actually support amendments to the Growth Centre SEP that would allow in a time-limited manner land uses that are currently prohibited. At the moment, there's certain provisions within the SEP, as there are in our LEP, but they're limited to 12 months. So a resolution could be drafted that directs the CEO to have those discussions with the Department of Planning, get an understanding about whether or not the department would actually support that. There's a lot of work that's gone in this report that outlines what the opportunities of doing such a thing would be, including some of the downsides. So we've outlined what we believe the next steps would be. The recommendation that Council receive and note the report wouldn't have impacted if there was discussion at the council meeting tonight on the work that we could still do in this space, but I understand having a very clear recommendation is sensible.
So through you, Mayor, so in relation to, yes, where it does state the temporary 12 months, do we still need to go to the department to get this, or is that something we can implement without going to them?
So through the CEO, no, because that clause is already in the SEP. So what's required is somebody needs to put a development application in. What we're looking at here is, that's limited to 12 months. So there's, in some of these areas, there is going to be issues with developing that land for a number of years in relation to servicing. So we believe there is the potential where land use that's prohibited at the moment, that the impacts of that land use could be appropriately managed through a DA process, but it goes for longer than 12 months. There is the ability that we could have further discussions with DPI about how you could draft, a SEP or an LEP clause to that effect.
But also in your report on that page, in that last sentence of that, says this may be modified by a modification application. So really it may be 12 months initially, but then they can submit an application. So what I'm trying to cut out really is how do we do this without going to DPI and all these other people, where we're going to do all this work, it's going to go sit on someone's desk for another 6 months, it will then come back to us. How do we get something happening without worrying about everybody else? How can we do it with what's in our control?
Well, through the CEO, in relation to that, if those clauses are already there that allows that to be done, if somebody wishes to do something, they could lodge a development application under that clause of the SEP. So that's ultimately up to each individual landowner. If there's a land use that they're looking at doing on that site, if they comply with the provisions of the SEP, they could lodge a development application. What we're looking at is something a little bit further than that, because that's something that's available for anyone under the LEP or the SEP at the moment. However, we believe that there may be opportunities to further that, and we believe further discussions with DPI on that matter are still worthwhile having.
All right, so then does it make sense to communicate that to the current landowners to say there is a provision in the SEP that allows you to do A, B and C, and then in the meantime we go for the longer term solution? Is that something that we can start on that's in our control? So because if someone comes into council now and says, this is what I want to do on this, if I want to put greenhouses up on an R2 piece of land in Leppington North, really the answer is going to be no, it's now low density. no one is being told, listen, there is a provision that if you comply with A, B and C, and that's a temporary land use, that you can apply for a 12-month and possibly get an extension. So what method can we use to communicate that to the landowners to say you still can do these things, there is a time frame on them, making them aware of everything else they need to go through?
Through the CEO, we can certainly use our social media, our website in relation to that. The website probably needs an update in relation to the growth centres with some of the changes that have been made to the Greenfield Housing Code. So we can certainly use our website for that. There are other ways through direct mail out. So we can certainly take that on notice and look at the most appropriate way to explain what the current planning provisions allow for, which allows somebody to lodge a development application in relation to that. And then it's ultimately up to council about whether further discussions are had with DPI. I think there's benefit in doing so. And I'm quite comfortable to have those discussions with DPI to see what we could further allow in the intervening period between when urban development occurs in some of these areas.
Two further, if I may, Mayor. One, when does the rate notice go out, and are we still doing our newsletters in those? We send the annual one out shortly, that thing that everybody looks forward to.
Mr. Humphreys.
Through the CEO, in relation to the month, I believe the next one is in May. However, typically we do leverage off the mail out, and we use that as an opportunity for communications and marketing.
All right. And there's a recommendation on the floor, so it won't be changing it. But can that be taken on notice? So we put something in that, which we then know that each ratepayer actually receives direct mail from us, and somewhere in that newsletter, just make them aware of those provisions, and then also use our other media channels just to let them know that. And it'd be nice if we do proceed with DPI to see if there is a solution. That obviously won't affect growth in the future. We don't want to see something go up today that's going to then stall, streets and roads and detention basins going in.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
I'm going to take that as a sort of debate for. Okay. I'll ask again, is there any opposition?
It just brought something to my mind, Madam Mayor, if I could question.
Yes, what's your question?
Would it be to our advantage to be taking a collaborative approach with this, with other local government areas that have growth areas as well?
I'll ask the CEO.
The short answer to that, Councillor, is yes, and we're currently doing that, particularly through the city deal mechanisms.
I missed what you
It's going through the city deal.
It's going to be done through the city deal.
Yep. Okay. No opposition, I'm going to put it. Those in favour, those against. Any opposition, because your names are getting listed. So it's unanimous. Thank you. The next item is on page 106.
Move that way, Mayor.
Seconded.
Thank you. Keep forgetting the gentleman to my left. How could I forget the left?
I've got a question in relation to EGRO 03. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Okay, what is your question?
According to Council's naming convention policy, which refers to state government instruments, it is not supported generally to name properties merely because somebody's or their family is a previous owner. I suspect this is going to get passed, but my question is, will it have difficulties later on when this is referred to the Geographical Names Board and they start to look at their own policies in relation to as much, which is actually referred to in Council's policy as well?
Through the CEO.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. So a number of street names are put forward every year in relation to people that have passed away and reflecting their historical ties to an area. We're currently doing a review of our street naming policy. It's been some years since we've reviewed that. In response to whether there would be difficulties from a GMB perspective, there hasn't been to date on a number of the street naming requests that we've put up to Council that are based effectively on the same type.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yep. We have a mover and a seconder. Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item is on page 111.
Mover, Mayor.
Moved
Question,
by
Mayor.
Councillor Did. Seconded by
What was
Councillor
that?
Hall. Sorry.
He moved and seconded?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, I wanted to add something.
Yes.
He's very quick tonight, isn't he? I just wanted to add a number 3 to there, that we lobby the state government to contribute funds to the complete upgrade of Edmondson Avenue all the way up into Bringelly Road.
Are the mover and seconder happy with that? No problem? Okay. So point 3, that we lobby the state government to include funding for Edmondson Avenue. And what's the other?
That we lobby the state government to include funding from Edmondson. No, it was actually lobby the state government to contribute funds to the complete upgrade
Yep.
of Edmondson Avenue to Bringelly Road.
Yep. Okay.
Can we?
Question.
Madam Mayor, so just
yes.
for clarity,
Yes.
when motions like this are moved, should we have a time frame that council staff will lobby, when we'll get word back, and just to see how it's travelling?
There is an action with inside council that tracks all the resolutions, so they have to basically come back to council in a timely fashion. Now, there might be issues around why this doesn't happen straight away, but it will happen, I would imagine, quite easily, because it's basically information driven and it's lobbying. So that's usually a little, I would say easier, but a little easier to do than other matters that council does raise.
I was just hoping that it could be done sooner rather than later. I mean, the lobbying, and hopefully we are successful, just because while the works are going on, they might as well complete the rest of the works rather than go to the trouble of the residents being...
The CEO wishes to comment.
Yep.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Now, my understanding, will take David's professional advice on that, is that your request for a third point is actually included in the second recommendation there, where we say seek a commitment for additional funding to complete the upgrade of the remaining section of Edmondson Avenue from 7th to 15th, and for the full upgrade of 15th.
Yep, that's fair, but I'm just a little concerned because Bringelly Road isn't included there, so I would really like it to be included. So...
My understanding again, but David, correct me if I'm wrong, that's included in that first phase.
That's correct. So, Councillor, the money that has been secured is from Bringelly Road to 7th Avenue. Yep, that's right. So from Bringelly to 7th is stage 1. Land acquisition is from Bringelly to 15th. Point 2 does say that we continue to seek a commitment for additional funding to complete the upgrade of the remaining section of Edmondson Avenue from 7th to 15th, given that Bringelly to 7th has been funded, and also for the full upgrade of 15th Avenue. And for the information of councillors, we are lobbying almost a daily basis in relation to both of those roads to be able to have those funded and delivered as soon as possible. So I do believe it's covered off in 2, but if 3 was modified slightly, that says lobby the state government to contribute funds for the complete upgrade of Edmondson Avenue and 15th Avenue, it's covered in 2, but it's not really problematic if it was reinforced with the lobby term, I guess.
You happy with that, councillor?
I am happy with that.
Mover and seconder happy? Okay. Any opposition?
Question, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Chitty.
Thanks. In relation to the application, it says we made an application for that stage. Is that all we made the application for, or was it limited to what we can make an application for? I'm just curious as to why we didn't make an application for everything.
Again, I think, Councillor, my understanding is that that's all that we could apply for at that particular time. It tends to be state government's approach to phase things in, but again, Charles will provide us with the technical detail.
Through the CEO, the bucket of money, if you like, that was available was about $220 million to to be shared between 6 councils. In fact, Liverpool had the largest share of the contribution. I can see you taking a calculator to work it out, but Liverpool had the largest contribution. We couldn't have asked for the total cost of the project. That funding would not have been given.
Sorry, we couldn't or we didn't?
We did, but we were told we were not likely to be given total funding for the entire project. The cost of the entire project is about $105 million, and the department felt it was not reasonable for half the funding available to be given to just one council.
But then the department, on the other hand, different department, the arts department the other day did all these funds for the arts centres, and Parramatta got the majority of it and we got nothing.
Councillor, that's an unfair question of a staff member.
No, it's not. It's criticism of...
Yeah,
No. It's not a criticism of council. Where I'm going with it is, if you don't ask, you never receive. And...
I think council staff...
Through the CEO, the buckets of monies are very different. I mean, this is a program called Special Infrastructure Levy. Some of you would be aware they collect money from local developers. They pool the money and they share it to the relevant councils every 3 to 4 years. If the council wants to lobby the state government, that's a separate exercise, but this bucket of money that the officers were dealing with is specifically under the state Special Infrastructure Contribution Program.
Clarify, Mayor, I was cracking it at the state government, not at our staff. Thank you.
Fine.
Madam Mayor, I also have a question.
Yes, Councillor Caliendo.
I know when we previously did a road upgrade of a similar nature up at Benara Road, we were able to reduce some costs and do it in a sustainable way by using recycled materials. Is a similar approach envisioned here? And if so, will that be kind of reflected or specified in the tender process?
Through the CEO, thank you for the question, Councillor. The answer is yes, absolutely. We plan to use as much of our recycled road materials in all our road projects, as well as other forms of sustainability elements like LED lighting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item's on page 115.
Happy to move that way.
Councillor Did.
Seconded. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. Is there any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item on page 123. Oh,
Move it.
123. Thank you, Councillor Did.
Just some questions.
Moving. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Hall, thank you. Yes, question.
I know that with conferences like this, there's an early bird special and those kind of things. If you get in early, you get is there an early bird special, and will we still be getting the early bird special or whatever it's called for this particular ticket?
Mr. Georgiakis.
Thank you. Through the CEO, yes, it will meet the early bird deadline. The early bird deadline closes in early May.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item's on page 125.
Madam Mayor, I have an amendment. Happy to move the motion with an amendment.
You've got a motion. What is your motion?
The motion is, as it reads, a breach of Council's Code of Conduct that has been affirmed as a breach of Code of Conduct and finalised through Council's process for breach of Code of Conduct in the previous 12 months, prior to the close of nominations in the same 12-month period, will preclude a nominee from being considered for an award until nominations are called for the following 12-month period, for the next following 12-month period. The reason for the amendment, Madam Mayor, is that we do need, if we are going to preclude such people, to tell them how long they are precluded for. And we do need to mention the processes for the Code of Conduct, and we could get into difficulty if we don't have that included in the motion. because when there is a breach of a code of conduct, it has to go through the code of conduct processes. And until the code of conduct processes have been finalised, which may include that there might be an investigation and then recommendations from that investigation, it would be advisable for that to be clarified if we are going to put this motion forward. I'm happy to put the motion forward if we have those amendments.
Well, that is your motion, Councillor,
That's right.
so you're moving it.
Yep.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hall.
I'll speak against.
All right, well, wait a minute. You can speak against. You wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Rhodes?
Yes, Madam Mayor. As I said, there are situations of a breach of code of conduct that is not met by the recommended change to the Charter. More possible complex matters need to be considered to cover all situations. A breach of code of conduct is subject to Council's procedures of code of conduct, which may require an investigation, the right to reply, the findings to be reached, followed by appropriate council mediation, additional education and/or other permissible measures to address the breach. Until the findings of any alleged breach of the code of conduct investigation affirm that an actual breach of the code of conduct has occurred and the accused has had the right to appeal those findings and the finding of the alleged breach is upheld, legally or technically speaking, there is no confirmed breach of the code of conduct. Council cannot act with punitive intent, which any action against an alleged breach of the code of conduct that has not followed the code of conduct procedures could be misunderstood as being. Therefore, it is essential that the Council's process of code of conduct is identified a part of the proposed change being recommended to the Charter. For clarity of the Charter, it is advisable to have identified periods in which the affirmed breach for the code of conduct precludes and does not preclude a person from being considered for nomination of an award.
Thank you. We have a speaker against. Councillor Haggerty?
I'm only speaking against because that's a really long sentence. And I appreciate that Councillor Rhodes is trying to clarify the additional criteria, but I guess the hat I always put on with these things is when all us councillors have retired to a lovely life in the sun, and there are other councillors and staff that need to read this, is it clear? And I'm not sure it is, but I do appreciate the sentiment that Councillor Rhodes is trying to get at, so maybe we should wordsmith this one a bit. Yeah, a breach of council's council's code of conduct is a breach of council's code of conduct. I'm not sure if we need all that bit after that.
An affirmed breach?
A breach is a breach, isn't it not?
Well, a breach, you will be issued with a breach of code of conduct, but it's not really a code of conduct until you've gone through the process. And this could have implications because you could have a person who is raised on a breach of conduct, and that might be in a certain year where they're nominated, but it hasn't been...
Okay, well, someone's added the word confirmed. Very good. A confirmed breach of conduct in the previous 12 months?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We still need prior to the close of nomination, so it's got to be within that 12-month period of that.
It says in the same 12-month period. It says prior to the close of nominations in the same 12-month period.
In the same 12-month will preclude, and then do we put in until nominations are called for in the next following 12 months? How long are you going to preclude him from?
It says will preclude any...
For an award. That's where it
Through
is.
a nomination. It's moving. I'll wait till it stops. In a sec, just hold on.
No, we're talking a nomination.
Okay, Councillor Hadid, are you speaking for or against?
No, just some sort of clarification.
Yep, okay.
It's,
Right.
So Councillor Road if you can hear me.
Councillor Rhodes, Councillor,
Can you hear
through
me?
the chair,
I can.
Councillor Hadid has a question.
Just for example, if a nominee for an award has a case against him, okay? So how are you going to deal with it?
That's exactly the point. It needs to
You
be...
from my point of view, if the nominations date closed, he should be nominated because the case hasn't been completed against him. So how you can, okay,
Or
give him
her.
a chance if the still there is a case against him hasn't been finalised.
Well, that's
the
why we
question.
put in the word a confirmed breach of code of conduct, which means that the person has been accused of a code of conduct, it has been investigated and confirmed, and it's gone through that code of conduct process that council is bound to do. It is only after it's gone through that process that you have somebody who is actually in breach of a code of conduct.
I believe you can stop, you know, the process and wait for a nominee for his case to be finalised.
So I think what Councillor Hadid's trying to say is that the matter, you know, if there's a matter being considered, then everything stays on hold until the matter is satisfied, confirmed or not.
Yeah, you can wait.
Yeah, you can't wait. Yeah. All right. Well,
We ended up making the sentence longer in my attempt to make it shorter.
Can I ask if this works?
Yeah.
Line 1 and then line 2 after nominations, full stop.
a confirmed breach of code of conduct finalised through the council process for breach of code of conduct in the previous 12 months prior to the close of nominations. Full stop.
No, in the previous 12 months prior to the close of nominations, full stop. Does that...
Well, I don't think it picks up on what Councillor Did's saying. He's saying somebody may get put up for an award and the matter hasn't been sorted as yet. It's still going through the process. Pardon?
So you can apply? It's not confirmed?
It's not confirmed, that's right. But it may be confirmed. So what happens then?
Tough luck. It's not confirmed yet. You're innocent until proven guilty.
Okay, all right.
The law.
Well, the mover and the seconder have to agree to the change. Are you happy with the change?
Madam Mayor, if we can, after that full stop, just put in from being considered for an award until nominations are called for the following next 12-month period or something. You need a date from which they're precluded from. You're not going to preclude them forever, or are we? 12 months.
Okay.
And then I'm happy with that. Get rid of the bit down the bottom.
All right, we have a mover and a seconder and they're happy with the words that I think we're going to delete that bit. So it now reads a confirmed breach of the code of conduct finalised through the council process for a breach of code of conduct in the previous 12 months prior to the close of nominations from being considered for an award until nominations are being called for the following 12-month period. Move back.
I think we could put a full stop at award and it would still make sense. You're saying you can't apply if you've had a code of conduct in the previous 12 months for the previous 12 months. And we've spent too long on this.
So how do we say, but you can be considered for nomination at some time after that?
The CEO wishes to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we've dropped the word precludes from that second half where we say prior to the close of nominations from being considered. I think that should be prior to the close of nominations precludes from being considered.
Yeah. Precludes in between nomination and from.
Yep. Okay.
I'm happy with that.
Right, you've spoken for it. We've had a speaker against it. We've had a speaker in between. Do we have any other speakers for? Councillor Hall, did you wish to speak? No. Anybody wish to speak against it? I'm going to put it. Put your hands up. Those in favour? Those against? Declare it lost.
And you can record me as voting against. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
And record me as voting against it, Madam.
Me also, Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to remind councillors there is a recommendation in the book on page 125.
Yeah, I'll move per the book.
Okay.
No, sorry, Madam Mayor, I need to be recorded as voting against the next motion that's going
Well,
up.
we
as
haven't
per the
got
book.
there yet, so can you just hold your...
I voted for it, I put it up, so take my name out of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So moved the book. We've got a seconder for the book. Thank you, Councillor Did. I think everybody knows what it's about. Please, could you put your hand up, those in favour? Those against? All right, we're going to do that again. Those in favour, please put your hand up clearly for the book. Yep, it's passed, it's moved. Thank you.
Can I be voted?
Record me as, and
Councillor
Councillor
Sheldon.
And record me as voting against it as well.
Council Rhodes. Yep, no worries. Thank you. The next item's on page 129.
Move that way.
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Question.
What is your question, Councillor?
This is the software one, I imagine, yes. The question is, does council use near maps as well as part of all of this software?
Mr. Ampuris.
Thank you. Through the CEO, if I can refer that question to our CIO, Mr. Hub.
Through the CEO, yes, we do.
Thank you. That means we can get access to it as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Anybody wish to speak against the motion? I'll put it, those in favour, those against, carried. Next item's on page 133.
Move that way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor
I'll
Shelton.
second.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Any opposition? I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item is on page 139.
When Councillor Hachidi leaves the room, I have a motion.
Wait a moment, hold your horses. What is your motion, Councillor Haggerty?
Ta-da! There, I'll let everyone have a read.
Pardon?
It's on the screen now.
Oh, okay. I didn't look at the screen, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, what happened? Okay, thank you.
Happy to second it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody wish to speak for it? Do you wish to speak for it, Councillor?
Yeah, I'll guess I'll talk through why I put there what I put there. As we're all aware, we had a considerable flood event in the last couple of weeks. We've been inundated, pun intended, with photos and video. I know council staff have had a look at it. I think, Peter, your guys are still cleaning up out there. It's still early days. There are still lessons to be learnt. So there's still lessons to be learned from the flood. What I'm suggesting is we actually take a step back, have a very good look at that event. Was it a 1 in 20? Was it a 1 in something else? How closely did it correlate to the flood map, the proposed flood maps? Where did we go wrong? Where did we didn't? Why is that the case? Does that tie in with the other information we've received from independent consultants that have made submissions on behalf of residents? And also, I guess there's been a lot of discussion about councillors' individual and individual liabilities and councillors' collective liability. I don't feel I've got adequate information in regards to that, so I've included a bit here that what's been suggested to me is that either way there are potential consequences for councillors based on how we vote, so I'd like to actually get some independent legal advice on both of those. In particular, if we were to vote them down, and I'm not suggesting we do, that, and there is a catastrophic flood event, are we liable as a council, are we liable as individual councillors? If we vote for the flood study and, someone's house now is under the 1 in 100 and they have basically, they're uninsurable, what liability do we have there? I'd also we know that through this process we've uncovered illegal fill. What effect has that had? We've also, from these most recent floods, we've realised that we probably need to go out there and do a bit of a clean-up along some of the waterways, along some of the culverts, along some of the roads there. And also that's going to cost money, so let's lobby the state and federal government for that. I will make the point, I did make the point at the beginning there as well. I'm in no way saying that these proposed ones are wrong. I'm not saying the ones before them are wrong. I'm not saying they're right. But I am noting that obviously technology and techniques have changed in 17 years. And we are using things like LiDAR and other technologies that weren't around at the time. So I just want to make that very clear. So that's the motion.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest. Since this motion, rightly or wrongly, refers to the individual liability of councillors, and then we propose to vote on it, I'm going to declare a conflict. I'm going to call it non-pecuniary, less than significant, because I don't think there is a issue in relation to individual liability, but nevertheless I'm stuck with the words in the motion, and the words in the motion do refer to individual liabilities on the part of councillors, and therefore I declare a conflict accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shelton. Noted.
Madam Mayor, I just have a question.
Yes, Councillor.
I want to know the flood report before us, does that take into account flood mitigation that will be done in the near future once Aerotropolis is up and once developments start happening out that way? And also, does it take into account, all the drainage that's going to come along with that?
Mr. Otar.
Through the CEO, thank you, Councillor, for that question. So what is in front of councillors, what is being presented is the mapping of the flood extents in a 1% flood event. It does not, at this point in time, take into account any future flood mitigation works because we do not know what that is. As councillors would be aware, the South Creek catchment has been identified as a fairly critical environmental spine, and the state government actually currently undertaking planning for the whole catchment, the green corridor, as well as development of a delivery strategy for the restoration of the creek, as well as it may or may not include flood mitigation work. So we do not know currently the scope of any future flood mitigation works. So right now, I guess councils have a legal obligation to set the flood planning level for all of its flood-prone lands. And what this report does, it guides council in determining the flood planning level. And we have a range of, legal context and requirements to comply with, and that's the context in which this report is presented.
Thank you. Does someone wish to speak against the motion? You're in favour. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Dean?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Well, Madam Mayor, I believe all of us receive heaps of email from the land owners. In this regard, some of the email supported by images of their land. Well, what they're saying, their property never been affected by flood since since the flood study adopted by Council 2004, which has been 17 years ago. So I'm not here to act as a god. In the future, their property may flood. Oh, I'm not. So I don't know what will happen. As you said, Mr. Raj, we don't know what will happen. So we have to have a very solid evidence to list this property as a flooded zone area. Well, Madam Mayor, to be honest with you, I found myself in very difficult positions to make a decision in regard of the new flood study. The landowners have received two very big hits this year. Once by the Department of Planning, rezoning their land for green space, devalue their land, and this is the next one now. The new flood study. Well, look at the value of the land. Look at the other consequences the resident have to face. So to be honest with you, now I'm of the opinion that all mitigations work must be completed by the council and the state government and who else, I don't know, prior to our final votes to adopt the flood study of this caliber. Well, Madam Mayor, to be honest with you, as a councillor, as a human being, any decision I have to make should enable me to go home and sleep with a peace of mind. This new flood study prevents me to do so. I'm sorry about it. I support the motions moved by my colleague, Councillor Haggerty, and myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I just be asked that that be scrolled up a little bit so I can read the rest?
Oops.
No, sorry, down.
That's it.
Just a question.
Yes,
in regards to Councillor Shelton's conflict of interest, can we get some legal advice on whether we're allowed to ask for legal advice, individual legal advice? I know we're in the inception at this point, but I just want to get some clarity on the if he's declared a conflict of interest for that reason, then we all have a conflict of interest for that reason. And if
But can I remind you, Councillor?
I know it's on us to do it, but
Councillor Shelton has decided that is the path he wishes to take, and that's his right to. What are you actually asking legal advice on?
Well, if we vote for them and there's if we vote against the flood maps and there's a big flood, people are harmed or worse, property is destroyed, is council liable, and as individual councillors are we liable? And conversely, if we vote for these flood maps and a landowner is adversely impacted financially, so whether it's land values or their insurance goes through the roof, again, are we liable as a council and are we liable as individual councillors?
I'll ask the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the critical principle here is that under Section 733 of the Local Government Act, the councillors, when they provide flood-related advice in good faith to protect people and properties from flood risks, I think that's the obligation. So, but I'll ask Mr. Aitar for the further detail on that.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. You are absolutely correct about Section 733. But can I just give a bit more of the legal context? Firstly, under 117, Section 117 of the Environment Planning Assessment Act, the planning directions require council to set flood planning levels, as I just advised earlier. And the planning directions also go to the extent of stating that the flood planning level shall be based on the 1% event, which is what we're doing here. And then the 733 of the Local Government Act, provides immunity from liability to the extent that council has acted in good faith. Now, the test for good faith or acting in good faith is substantially following the flood policy and the flood plain development manual, again, which is exactly what is being presented in this report. So the 1% flood extents that are being presented are in full compliance with the flood planning directions and the Section 733 of the Local Government Act. So they are the two, I guess, the legislative instruments that we'd be in breach of if knowingly we are not providing this flood information to the impacted residents of Winnemata South Creek.
Thank you.
Just
Councillor
through you.
Excuse me, Councillor Ayad. You next, Councillor.
Madam Mayor, I just have a couple of questions for the Director through the Chair. Is it fair to say that both the state government building the Aerotropolis and council will both be doing flood mitigation works in the district, in the area?
Through the CEO. So the City Deal commitment, or under the City Deal commitment, the state government is obliged to prepare a delivery strategy for the restoration of the South Creek and the areas that have been zoned as environmental recreation. The point I made earlier is, at this point in time, without the delivery strategy being developed, we do not have full knowledge of what it actually entails. Now, if the state government so decides to undertake flood mitigation works to alter the flood extent, then that will form part of the delivery strategy. But like I said earlier, we actually do not have that knowledge at this point in time. But I would also imagine, back to your second question about the responsibilities for delivery, it'll be, I guess, state government responsibility for the delivery of the required works, whether it's environment restoration works or civil flood mitigation works.
Okay, and for the major works, is there a time frame that the state government or council is aware of for the flood mitigation works to undertake, or the study on the restoration of South Creek? Is there a time frame there or limit?
At this point in time, we are not aware of any timelines for the development, acceptance of the strategy, and then an implementation plan that would actually follow. So that would be the process, but we're not aware of the timeline. Sorry, Councillor.
Okay. Madam Mayor, if I may make a suggestion to the mover and the seconder, where it says defer until such time as, I think it's very important that we include that once these investigations are complete, we'll have more information, because, look, I appreciate the sentiment of this motion and I'm very happy to support it, but I'd be even happier if we could include in there that the state government is actually undertaking studies of South Creek, the restoration there, and we have no timeline for that, because I think that will directly impact flooding in the area, and flood mitigation is very important. So we need to understand what the state government is doing in the area in order to be able to support flood studies.
Yep. Is the mover and seconder happy with that?
Yep. And
hold on. Councillor Blute's next.
I'm happy to remove the point about the legal advice as well. I'm satisfied with the answer there. And I'm still tossing this one up, but in the first point, notes the flood studies have been... No.
Okay, Councillor Blute, you had a question.
Yeah, just through you, Madam Mayor, to see, again in reference to Info 1, can Council outline the processes and technology used to determine the final outcome of this report? One, what assurances can Council provide to determine the validity of the report? Now, in recent days, we know in New South Wales and Sydney Metro, the devastation that's taken place in the lives of our community. So it is imperative that we know what we're doing and basically understand very well whether we vote this report or not. I've got confidence in council staff that that report is, I went through it extensively. Now, if I was going to, I as a councillor, defer that report for any reason, would I be legally liable in any form or any shape? Now, I think Raj has answered part of that. And really, I think that we should do something about it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes?
Yes, Madam Mayor. one thing that stands out to me with the report...
Excuse me, are you debating or are you asking a question?
No, I am... It's leading to a question, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
The question is that in the report, there were... It says that we know that there was some areas that were flooded previously under the old plans, and that those areas are no longer flooded, but the property next door is flooded. And this concerns me, that I just don't want to make more mistakes. Is there something that we will later learn that should have been put into this computer that would change a result? And in view of the consequences of the seriousness of deciding on the flood zones, I would feel very much more comforted if we had that reassurance. So the question would be, with the recent flood, which we're saying was probably a 1 in 20 year flood, but houses that are built in the 1 in 20 year flood were not flooded. So I'm not understanding the amount of flood that we're calling a 1 in 20 year flood. If a house wasn't flooded in the recent flood events, what sort of an extent of a 1 in 20 year flood may it have been? And this is bothering me.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask the CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor, so I would make one comment. Any study, any methodology will be based on a number of assumptions, and there are always constraints around those assumptions. And Mother Nature, in this instance, will always test any hypothesis. So, in making that sort of general comment, I'll ask Mr. Outar to deal with the issues of reliability and the technology on those underlying assumptions.
Through the CEO, thank you for that question, Councillor. So the 2004 study, which is the current study, is based on aerial photographs or study of aerial photographs from the 1990s. So it's probably the best guess at the time. The current study, or the study that is being submitted here for Council's endorsement, is based on one of the most current and most innovative technologies. It uses a laser, to determine the topography of the land. Now, the flood study, the flooding is really a function of two things. One is the topography, and the other one is the rainfall and its intensity. Now, Council does not have control on either. What we do have control on is the technology that we use to develop a digital terrain model, and that's precisely what has happened. So we're not suggesting at all that there's been changes to the topography. What we're saying is that there's changes there's innovations in the way land survey is undertaken. There's higher levels of accuracy, and the other thing that has happened is that the modelling that we've developed is actually a two-dimensional model. It mimics, it represents a far better, reality, accuracy of how flooding occurs in the catchment. So that's I guess, the reliability that we place and the confidence we place. Now, just to gain further confidence, we actually had an independent consultant undertake the study, and once the study was concluded, we engaged another consultant to peer review the study that was undertaken. Now, because we wanted to be confident and be assured that the information we take to the community and to yourself, councillors, that we had that higher levels of confidence before we could publish this and use this as the basis for 1% flood study and to inform planning for the Aerotropolis and those precincts. With regards to the second question about the flooding or flooding that wasn't experienced 2 weeks ago, I think by way of a memo yesterday, I have given some data about what a 1% flooding would look like based on the rainfall intensity and the duration, and what actually happened in that catchment. So I'm not sure about the information Councillor referred to, that the house is in a 1 in 20 year. Even I'm not sure what the source of that information is. but I'm happy to have that or investigate that offline to see why that house wasn't flooded, if that is the point that is being made. But the point that my memo makes is that the flooding, to trigger a 1% event in that catchment, you need 400 millimeters of rain over less than 5-day period. What we actually experienced was 290 mils over the same period. So there's no way you could actually have those houses flooded, because we never expected to experience a 1% flood in that catchment. We have taken and measured levels of flood levels at other key points along the creek, and to further confirm as to what that extent or the severity of the flooding would have been, and we have further concluded that it was a lot less than a 1 in 20-year flood event. So in terms of comparison, I know residents have bombarded us with photos showing that the house hasn't flooded, but it's not surprising to us that it hasn't flooded, because it wasn't meant to be under the circumstances, which was the kind of rainfall that we received.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, you had a question?
Yes, again through to the Director. The flooding, while I understand the flood mapping and the LiDAR system that did the topography, and I understand that the accuracy previously was plus or minus half a metre, and the accuracy at the moment is plus or minus 150 millimetres, which is probably a third of what it was before. My question is, assuming we do nothing, and that means we don't do anything to do flood mitigation works, and neither does the state government, then the flood maps that have been suggested, or not suggested, actually indicated as per the report, would pose considerable danger to people who previously thought that they were not in a flood-prone area and now are. And we need to look at the other point of view too, and I didn't mean to debate, but there are people who will now be in the flood, but there will also be people who will no longer be in the flood area. The point is, the residents who contacted us with the photos and said, we've never had flooding here, let's remember that that went back to 1986. That's quite a long time ago. Do we remember that? So I think I know your answer, but I'll let you answer.
Through the CEO, that's a very good point that you make, Councillor, that if by not endorsing this study, Council would inadvertently be, or knowingly actually now, be endorsing and supporting and approving development in flood-prone land. The other point this report makes is there were 2 creeks that had never been mapped before. So we've got Thompson's Creek and Badger's Creek, which is actually not appearing in the current 2004 flood study. So that's another risk for Council, whereby knowingly we actually providing information, knowingly that there are two creeks that we now know are flood impacted, yet I think the suggestion that is being made is we keep going with the flood study that shows that they are not. And this is where the risk arises for Council in terms of, and the exposure in terms of, potentially approving development in areas that are actually flood prone, and goes against the 2 pieces of legislation that I referred to earlier.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Rhodes, you have another question?
Yes, I wonder if it is possible for Council to have a look at their current flood maps that they're proposing in relation to the historic data and give us a report back on that, so that we have had floods that we can remember, and they were certain flood types. 1 in 50, I think, was the 2019 one. What was that? What level flood was that determined to be, for a start, as one question? And the point that I'm getting at is that we need to be able to review the maps that are being proposed with the historic data of what previous floods have shown us.
So you wish to add an extra point to Councillor Haggerty's motion.
Well,
Councillor Haggerty, are you happy with that?
I'm not sure what we're asking for.
Look at the current flood maps based on historical data and provide further report to Council.
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can I just clarify whether that would actually give us different information to what we have now?
We don't know. That's why we're asking for it.
Well, I'll ask the CEO to get the answer for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll ask Raj to address that, because my understanding is that that's exactly what he referred to in the memo to councillors yesterday. But Raj, Mr. Aitar, if you would explain, please.
Thank you, CEO. So, councillors, can I refer you to the memo that I sent yesterday? Part 2 of that deals with flood history and recorded flood levels over the last 40 years within the South Creek catchment. And back to the question, last year's flooding that was experienced early last year came very close to the 1% flood extent. So, going back to the underlying question, councillor, this flood study in the peer review actually has gone back and validated this information against the historic flood levels, and that's actually a normal process in any flood study to look at historic flooding in the catchment to validate this data before we actually present this information to council. So the work that is being requested has actually already been done as part of the flood study and the peer review.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes, you wish another question?
Perhaps I've worded it wrongly. It's not the historical data, but the local history.
To when?
The local history going back to that 2019 flood. Talk to the people out there and find out where they say that the place is flooded, and does that align with the flood maps as are being presented. We seem to have this difference of what the flood maps are saying and what the people out there on the ground are actually saying. Now, we don't know we don't know whether we haven't put in all the adequate data.
Well, Councillor, can I just stop you there? Because I hear you and I understand your sentiments, but I just need to make a statement, and I think the council officer has made this particularly clear. This report, whether you agree with it or not, has been compiled through professional experts in their field. Now, that may or may not make people happy, but that's the reality, and that's what you have before you. And also there are pieces of legislation that as councillors have to meet as well. So I think, while I appreciate what you're trying to do, I would be personally unhappy if councillors were drawing their own flood maps.
Just to clarify, it's the assumptions that we've been told that we have to put in assumptions.
That's right.
And
based on data.
Yes, we just need to know that are those assumptions correct?
So who chooses what's correct and what's not correct?
Yeah, who does?
Well, I would suggest the professional folk do, because that's what they do for a living. But this is a matter for council. You have a motion before you. You have quite a bit of discussion. I'm going to bring the discussion to an end. Councillor Haggerty, do you want your right to reply?
Yep. Can we take the first point out as well? I think that's a given. I guess where I'm at here is, I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but robo-debt, right? Where algorithms were set up, assumptions were plugged into a computer, and it spat out at the other end, this person owes the government $10,000, this person owes $4,000. Where that whole thing went wrong was when it spat out the other end, there wasn't human intervention in there to verify those results. What we've done here with this study is we've plugged a bunch of assumptions and numbers into a computer model, and it spat out some flood maps. Given what's happened over the last 2 weeks with the floods, we are now presented with an opportunity to verify the results of those flood maps with some human intervention, some on the ground pictures, experiences, videos of what actually happened. I've spoken to residents out there, and there are people who've spoken to me and said the flood maps say the back corner of my property floods. It doesn't, but I'm happy to admit that the other corner floods, and you said it hasn't. So when people are telling me things like, when they're happy to offer up that parts of their property are flooding when they shouldn't, I tend to sort of think that, maybe we've got something to look at here. So for me, there are too many questions that remain unanswered, and we're really presented here with an opportunity to go and answer those questions or verify those questions through the experience that landowners have had over the last 2 weeks in regards to the floods. So what did they see? Do they have photographic evidence of it? Do they have video evidence of it? Does it call into question some of the assumptions in this model? If so, do we need to tweak the assumptions, and do we need to produce more accurate flood maps? Also, I've thrown in there, of course, that we regardless of which way this goes, whether we vote for the flood maps or we don't, or we defer them or whatever, it's quite clear that we need to go out there and start doing some flood mitigation works in some of these water channels, and we need to investigate what appear to be significant amounts of illegal fill. So regardless of what happens here tonight, I think we need to go out there and do that. So that's it, councillors. Decision time.
Okay, well, on that happy note, those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, declare it carried.
Madam
Somebody
Mayor, the second bullet point should probably have the word study at the end of it in relation to the proposed flood.
Thank you. Could we get Councillor Chitty back in the room, please?
Madam Mayor, can we record whether that was unanimous or not?
Was it unanimous, councillors? Yeah.
Well, let's call for a division.
Well, Councillor Chitty's coming back in the room, so... All right, so everybody's voted for it. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item is committee reports, and there's several of them. You wish?
Mayor, I'm happy to move CT number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 and 11 as a whole, but I have issues with number 1, number 7 and number 9.
7, 9. Okay, so Councillor Rhodes moving for everything with the exception of 1, 7 and 9.
Hold on. What are we pulling reports out, are we?
Yes.
Can we pull out 10 too? Oh no, we've got 10. Bingo.
10. No, 10 hasn't moved.
Oh, can we pull 10 out, please?
Yep, 10. Any others people wish to pull out? Okay, so we have, with the exception of 1, 7, 9 and 10, moved by Councillor Rhodes, seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Did.
Madam Mayor, you may as well leave number 9 in, okay? So
You don't want to pull it out?
No, leave it in because we're
Okay.
going to address that separately.
All right, so the exception of 1, 7 and 10, I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Number 1, Councillor.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I wish to refer to, in the minutes on page number, bear with me, in the report it refers to the enforcement, not policy, it's standard, and we took that to the ARIC committee.
What page are you talking about, Councillor?
Page 224, attachment book.
Thank you.
Hang on, that's December 2020, sorry.
This one's dated the 5th of February.
Yep. Bear with me, I'll have to look it up to be able to refer you to it. 99. Is it 220 page? No, it can't be.
Is it 0.612, 6.2, page 162?
I thought it was paid item number.
Is it about private certifiers, Councillor?
No, it's not about the...
Okay.
Yes, it is about the private certifiers, Madam Mayor. Can you find it? Sorry.
It's on page 162 of your booklet.
162.
And it's under section 6.2.
Under 6.2. That's right. And that's the item that we took to the ARIC committee to get their feedback and what they thought. The ARIC committee's decision was that it was operational and they can't do anything about it. What it is in relation to was the standard where at the December meeting in 2020, EGRO 02, I pointed out that the the planning instruments of council being undermined by private certifiers in that, to give you a recent example, there was one where a DA was recently submitted to council and there were a few people that objected to it and it was withdrawn, only to be returned under a private certifier where no objections are really of any consequence. So considering ARIC or the councillors are not able to make recommendations for change to the council's enforcement standards, how would any amendment be agreed to and made to the council standards?
I'll ask the CEO.
Mr. Hampouros.
Thank you. Through the CEO, as you're aware, we do have a policy framework, and based on the criteria, that was deemed to be a standard because it was operational in nature, and on that basis, it has gone through that process, and it's deemed to be converted to a standard. Mr. Smith, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yes, thank you. Through the CEO, there's a couple of issues here. So first, it was the policy being changed to a standard. Mm-hmm. The standard does get reviewed regularly to make sure it's kept up to date with current legislative requirements. But the broader issue here is in relation to non-compliance with development consent that is ultimately then certified by a certifier. And this has been before council on a number of occasions, and the role there of the Building Professionals Board and Department of Fair Trading. So there are separate processes in relation to that. If council becomes aware, for instance, a development application that has been approved, even if it's certified by council, but then ultimately is built or certified by a private certifier, but ultimately built not in accordance with the planning approval, there are remedies available. So our enforcement standard very clearly sets out the role of council enforcement officers in relation to enforcement matters. And that's what guides council's compliance and enforcement staff when they undertake their enforcement duties. But there is an issue where applications that are privately certified, and some of these aren't in relation to development applications, they're in relation to complying development certificates, and there's been some concern about whether certain complying development certificates should have been issued or should not have been issued. That is the proper role for investigation by the Building Professionals Board and the Department of Fair Trading. But I'm confident that the council's enforcement standard is appropriate, and being referred to ARIC as well has confirmed that it is an operational standard.
Thank you very much. It still didn't explain to me how changes are actually made. Yes, it gets revised, but who makes that revision? And well, I wonder if I can move a motion, Madam Mayor, and see how we go with that. That council provide a report on how council's planning instruments are protected from being undermined by non-conformance by the council's planning to the council's planning instruments by private certifiers. 2, the changes to the legislation regarding private certifiers reserved under the Department of Fair Trading, as suggested to ARIC. ARIC suggested that council might provide that to councillors. And the third one is how the enforcement standard may be changed to meet the ever-changing challenges in the need of the Liverpool community. And if we could get that in a report, perhaps then we can go on with some further discussion about it.
Well, my suggestion would be to add that to the report's minutes. So if you're happy to move that motion in addition to the minutes.
Happy
so
to.
We have somewhere for it to sit.
Madam Mayor, can I just clarify something? Part 1 of the second
point of the motion would probably be covered by 6.2b in the minutes, in the response to Independent Gordon.
Well, it doesn't really, because you see, if you read the standard, the council will investigate matters when there is some form of safety issue, which doesn't include those other instances where it is private certifiers just doing the wrong thing because they know they're going to get away with it. In these standards, it actually points out where council will take action. In all other circumstances...
Can I just stop you there, Councillor, and just remind all councillors this is being streamed and nobody is protected legally in regards to anything.
Okay, could we include then to perhaps to might help Councillor Caliander that the enforcement standards also be included in the report so people can actually read them again.
Got a seconder? You second?
Not seconding, just asking a question.
Seconder? There isn't a seconder, or it's lapsed. Are you happy to second it, Councillor Howes? Seconding, thank you. Yes, Councillor Haggerty?
I'm confused. The issue here is, I think, what Councillor Rhodes' issue is that complaints are made to her or council about private certifiers, but, as I understand it, council isn't the enforcement authority for private certifiers. That's the something standards board. Is that correct? I'm getting a nod. I'll take that as a yes. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question on that?
Yes, Councillor Chitty.
If a complaint is received by a resident in relation to a development, they obviously call through council and say, you got this wrong. They then say, no, it's a private certifier. My understanding then is that the compliance team then serves something on the notice on the certifier to say, can you show us your file? And council then reviews that file and then says, yes, you got this right, you got that wrong. And then if there is a major issue, it then goes to the certifying board.
I'll ask the CEO to clarify that for you.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Through the CEO. Ordinarily, if we get a complaint, obviously they come to council first and say, there's a house being built next to me, or there's it looks like there's a non-compliance. So council will investigate. We will look at it. If we identify that it is a privately certified development, council contacts the certifier and says there's been a complaint that's been lodged, investigate. So the issue we have is when we do that and nothing happens. However, the team does look into it. Most of the concern is in relation to development that has already occurred, that has been built, and where there is a non-compliance. What the government is looking at in relation to this is what should be the role of council, because complying development has expanded significantly. Council, there was an announcement earlier this week in relation to the compliance levy more broadly that there will be some information coming out to councillors on, but the reason that the government is actually looking at bringing a compliance levy for complying development is because there's been concerns about council actually having to be much more involved in the complying development space when we actually don't receive any funds because we don't actually assess a complying development application. So if we believe something has been, I guess, assessed or determined that we believe doesn't comply with the codes that applied at the time, we can actually, and we have done, referrals to the Building Professionals Board on that issue. And so that has been the issue. But if I can just reinforce, council's enforcement standards themselves simply guide council's enforcement and compliance functions. What are the processes that council officers need to follow, consistently follow? And that's what the standards are in relation to.
Perhaps we can add another point to the report that we get back, and this is great. We need to know more information about it. Perhaps point 5 could be that council provide us with a report of the complaints that they've had and the number of times that and the result, what happened. They sent it through to the Chief Compliance Officer or whatever they have to do.
Thank you. Councillor Haggerty.
One more question. It's actually a statement, but I'll phrase it as a question. Can we ensure that operators at the customer service centre are aware of that process, so that when a resident calls and they say there's a private, they aren't just told, go look on the sign on the front of the fence and call the private certifier?
Through the CEO, so what we do, if somebody rings up and the customer service officer can see very clearly that it is a compliant development certificate, yeah, absolutely. Ordinarily, they would say to the person, have you spoken to the certifier in the first instance? Most of the time, they didn't know it was privately certified. And most people would expect to call council and for council to investigate. So customer service staff will firstly look at, was it a council-approved development or certified development? And we'll ask the question, has it been referred to the certifier? Most of the case, the customer says, I didn't know it was privately certified. So we refer them to the certifier. If they keep coming back to council and then saying the certifier won't take my call, what council can do and has done many times is we will contact the certifier. We have received complaints on this matter. You are the responsible person. You act as the council in relation to a compliant development certificate matter. You are required to look into that. That is the process. That's what's stipulated in the compliance standard to make sure that everyone understands what the role of each person is and what is council's obligations. However, as I said before, there was a media release from government early this week in relation to compliance broadly. We're digesting that. Once we do so, we'll provide that information to councillors because compliant development has increased substantially and no doubt will continue to increase substantially, and council does have much more of a role to play. Sorry, not a role to play, but we do get those concerns from the community, which is taking up resources, and we don't actually have the income that we ordinarily would get if it was a DA matter.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Rhodes, you wish to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I think even just by the conversations that this motion has sort of brought to the surface, I think there's a lot more that councillors can learn about what's going on. I think that I'm happy with the motion as put. We should put in there for a time that is convenient to council when you have got that information regarding the changes to the fair trading. And when you have that, that's when it should be coming back to council. So I don't know how to word that provide a report once the changes regarding the legislation on private certifiers and the Department of Fair Trading is available. So provide a report, should be up the top, provide a report once the information regarding once the changes to the legislation regarding the private certifiers under the Department of Fair Trading is available.
Just through you,
yes,
Madam Mayor,
Councillor.
would the councillor be open to a briefing, assuming that a briefing's a less resource-intensive way of disseminating the information?
I'm happy. It would involve a report of some sort as well, briefing or a report. I'm not fussed. I think a report might be the cheaper way to go.
I don't.
Well, and it also could be done at a strategic panel too.
CEO, sorry.
Yep, okay. Yeah, good.
I agree with Madam Mayor that we could do it at a strategic panel meeting.
Okay, I think everybody understands the motion. Have we got to move around a seconder? Yes, I'll put it. Those in favour? Those against? Declare it carried. Next item is committee number 7. Councillor Rhodes.
I just have a question about that, Madam Mayor. Included in that was the reference, and I don't know where it is, about the BMX track, where council is commencing recovery costs, and I just wondered if there was an update on that.
Councillor, I hate to say this, but this is actually minutes of a meeting, not a briefing session. Councillors should be advising themselves before meetings. While I appreciate the staff may have that information, that is not reasonable.
Okay, happy to take out the question, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can you move the minutes then, please?
Move that way, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
We've got it everywhere. So Councillor Chitty and Councillor Did. I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Number 10.
This one's me. Look, this is just a question I wanted to bring to Council, and Sports Committee was the most appropriate place for me to ask it. The Ash Road COVID clinic is impacting on the sporting organisations that use that field. I think everyone in Goodwill offered that up during, the pandemic. Everyone has no issue with doing what we could during the pandemic. We're now 12 months into the pandemic. Appreciate that testing still needs to be conducted, but at some point, surely New South Wales Health can find a more appropriate place that doesn't impact on what goes on at that field, in particular the Little Athletics. So I know we've provided alternate facilities, but that's their home ground. It's been developed over a number of years for Little Athletics. All their equipment's there. When I've driven around the place, I've noticed that they've got testing clinics at old Masters sites that have closed down, that aren't being used. Can we find a more appropriate space to relocate the Ash Road Clinic? I know it has been one of the busiest clinics, but is there somewhere nearby where they can still conduct their testing but not impact on what's going on at that club?
Thank you, Councillor. That's got nothing to do with the minutes, so I'm going to say the same thing to you that I just said previously. You could have asked that question prior to the council meeting or put it in a memo to the staff, but I'm sure in good faith that the staff have taken that on board. Can you move the motion?
I'll move the minutes.
Thank you. Seconder for the minutes?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any opposition? I'll put it, those in favour, those against, declare it carried. We will have a 10-minute break.
First?
They're not on my list yet. Let me have a look. If you want to do a presentation.
I just want to, just following up a presentation that was made by Councillor Haggerty at the last meeting.
It's after your questions, so it's on my list. So
it's after the question.
Hold your horses. There's a lot of questions.
Thank you. In relation to
your
the
question,
first questions, I'll get to the page.
Yep.
Madam Mayor, my understanding now is we don't need to use the word imminent anymore, and this was approved today, I understand. So I'd like to thank Mr. Artur, who I think finally signed off on a boardwalk at the paper mill. And given that I've probably cost his council, 10 trees with questions, I suggest it's named Hatchidi Boardwalk, Madam Mayor.
I think you've got to die for anything to be named after you, Councillor. If you are making
Thank you, but
an offer.
just on that, and yes, obviously the report was written.
Thank you.
But I'd like to thank everyone involved. Finally, we shall see a boardwalk under construction shortly. So that one is now never to be seen again.
Sorry, can I jump in there? Just on that development, I understand that there was some traffic work that needed to be done as part of the consent conditions, like roundabouts around Mill Road and all that. Can I get take it on notice, but can I get an update on where all that's at as well?
I think they'll take that on notice, Councillor. The next item is in Councillor Chitty's name.
Thanks, Mayor. Several service level agreements. Thank you, Mr. CEO, or whoever wrote the response. In relation to that, and I asked this in the terms of the budget because I can't get into operational stuff, but are we able to pull a report to say how long, for example, when a DA hits council, can we get stats on how long it sits in the clearinghouse, how long it takes to get a referral back from traffic, how long to get a referral back from building services, flooding and every other department that it goes to. And I ask that in the sense of a budget because we do allocate resources and then that way we can work out if we need more or less resources.
Thank
It's a way of getting the information
Thank you.
properly.
Councillor Chitty, your question 3.
Okay, thanks. Heritage review, thank you, Mayor. I do have, and again, thanks. I'm not sure if this can be answered. Further to that, on the bottom of page 260, the final sentence, the list will not be made public at this stage of the project. Why isn't it made public once we know that that's the properties that we will be researching?
Through the CEO.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Let me just read that and I'll come.
And while you're reading, on the next page it says eventually it will be made once you get someone and do everything else. But if we do have that information on hand at the time and that's what we're going to do a report on, why isn't that then made public once we actually get the information and not down the track?
Thank you. Through the CEO. So that first point is a detailed thematic history of the Liverpool area. The list of potential heritage items will be created through a series of community workshops. The reason we're not making that list public at that stage is we need to report that back to council with some commentary in relation to that. But the intention is through the heritage review that it is a community-led review, so that if we are through that process where people nominate buildings, we also want to understand the views of the people who actually own those buildings. Once we can report that to council, that will become public at that stage. But at the very initial stage, there will be a lot of community members, no doubt, who will be putting forward buildings that they believe should be heritage listed. We want to have the ability to actually talk to the people who own those buildings because they may have a different view. And then through that process, councillors will be involved. The heritage study itself will be finalised, but that's the first part of the process. Once that's done, a planning proposal to amend the LEP would actually be needed, and then there's formal consultation that goes through that process as well.
Thanks for that. In relation to this, obviously council has resources, can commission reports, engage the experts to say, okay, is this heritage or is this not heritage? Let's say a property that is being considered will obviously then go through the process and get a report. If the person in that house hasn't got the financial capability to engage, let's say, a lawyer or another heritage expert or whatnot, what financial assistance can be given to people like that? Or is it really David versus Goliath here?
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Through the CEO, the purpose of the heritage study is to identify buildings that council and the community believe have heritage significance. Through that, the consultants will actually do a proper review of heritage significance to determine whether or not a building is should be heritage listed or not. Through that process, we will be engaging with the owners. For instance, if a building is identified as being significant that warrants protection, then council ultimately needs to be discussing that with that landowner, and a decision from council will need to be made about whether or not, excuse me, that property should be listed. We can take that second point in relation to financial assistance on notice, and we can provide some further information to council on that.
Next question, councillor.
All good. Thanks for the response. I do believe, though, that there was some money allocated in the budget which didn't form part of that, but I thank you for that one.
Councillor, next question, question 5.
The wait time, and thanks again for the response. In relation to this, and I believe a memo came through while we've been sitting in this council meeting to a question that was taken. Are we able to get, for the next council meeting, obviously there's some money sitting in reserves that's been collected by the ratepayer or for people that have paid this levy. We all understand that we need to do a little bit more. I think everybody sees that in relation to this. Given that money, what is that sum that's sitting in the reserve?
Are you talking about the waste?
Yeah, the waste levy.
Waste levy. I'll ask
Mr.
the
Mandada.
CEO.
Sorry, the question was to the CEO?
Through Chair, CEO, and then I think...
What is the amount of money that's sitting in the waste levy?
End of quarter 2, 21, which is end of December, it was $17.6 million.
And while you're there, through you again, is any of that money committed?
No.
Okay. So, and this is no on anyone, we've got $17 million sitting in a reserve that's been collected by the ratepayer through this levy. Obviously, it's good to have $17 million, but we've collected it for a reason, and the reason wasn't to hoard it in a reserve. So, can we please, for the next council meeting, get a list of things that we do need? Do we need another couple of trucks out on the road?
Can I suggest, Councillor, that be taken on notice because you're asking?
Yeah, no, and it is to be taken on.
I think people get the gist, but I think it might be best if you had a presentation at the strategic panel meeting of the needs of the waste staff.
Yeah, I don't want to wait till a strategic planning that then goes to minutes, then comes to council in 3 months' time, because all that takes time. We've got $17 million sitting in a levy that's been collected by the ratepayer. We understand that there's a need out there in relation to dumping rubbish. In all honesty, Mayor, no, I don't want to wait 3 months if I need to.
I appreciate that, but I'd like to warn you that it'd be very inappropriate off the council floor to just
to ask for a report.
No, the report's fine. It's just
that's what I'm asking for. Yeah.
Oh.
So at the next council meeting, come back with, okay, what do we need? Where can we use this money for the purpose that it was collected for? And then that's considered by council.
Okay.
Yes, no, Mayor, I'm not doing
No,
anything.
fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd appreciate that for
All
the
right.
next one. That'd be great. In relation to this one, when you're ready.
all right. Next one's question 6.
Can I move something on this?
Yes.
Yeah, move that council starts a conversation with Water New South Wales with the ultimate aim to widen this bridge. Pretty simple, Mayor. It's a one-laner, it's a lot of traffic, it needs to be widened. Water New South Wales is the owner or is responsible for it.
Happy to say.
I think it's past its use-by date of
Okay.
being a one-lane bridge.
All right. Moved by Councillor Chitty, seconded by Councillor Didd. Is there any opposition? I'll put it those in favour, those against, carried. Next item's on question 7.
All good, thank you, Mayor.
Good. Question 8.
I think we spoke about that in a motion, so that is all good.
Okay, so the next one is question 9.
I note on page 270 down the bottom, detailed costings designs can be prepared. Now, it says can be prepared, so are you asking now for direction, or do you need direction
I'll
to
ask
prepare
the
them?
CEO to make a comment.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Through the CEO, no, we don't need direction from council on that. We are preparing preliminary designs and costs, and we will provide a further report back to council in due course.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
Didn't we receive an envelope of funding recently that included upgrades to Greenway Drive? There's a long list of things, and Raj sent an email with a list of it, and I said, that's a good list.
Mr. O'Toole.
Through the CEO, yes, Councillor, you're correct, but that related to the grant you're referring to is a stimulus package, local roads and community infrastructure that has gone into renewal of existing pavements. This is about enhancing the intersection widening, so it needs to go through a design approval process that wasn't allowed for in that stimulus package. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, you're on question 10.
That's all good on that one. They're out there. I just think I understand that we're waiting for development and we don't want to be spending money, but if there's an issue and it is under control, they are getting sorted. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Question 11, page 273.
Can I, and I stand to be corrected, did we not receive, I think it would have been 12 or 18, and this on notice, if it need to be, 12 or 18 months to say this was all done, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Question 12 on page 275.
That's mine, I think, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I apologise. Councillor Rose, Councillor Chitty had me baffled.
I can understand you becoming confused. That was
Yes.
a long list.
Well, he keeps going later, so. Yes, Councillor
This
Rose.
one's simple, Madam Mayor. The mobile office services, which is a great thing of council, the people in the community who are not computer literate, have no internet service and consequently are not on Facebook or other social media platforms, have asked when the council is intending to start council mobile office services again and what else can be done. Now, I appreciate the CEO's comment and I understand, yep, we're going to work out what we can do and that'll come back to us. But in regard to the mobile offices, is it possible for us to start those mobile offices again, you know, as soon as possible? Because I think that it does serve a purpose for the constituents. And I think, considering that we've now come out of COVID, I would like to put it to the councillors, perhaps we should be doing it once a month. So
I think you have to understand, Councillor, mobile officers are also very resource hungry.
Yep.
You do have to devote some council time, staff time and other things. So I'd be guided by the CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take advice from Mr. Georgiakis.
Yep.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Thank you. Through the CEO, in the CEO, the response to the question with notice, we state in there that staff are proposing to recommence the mobile offices in May and then hold another one in July in this term of council. Traditionally, yes, we have been holding them more recently, before COVID, bi-monthly. And as the Mayor pointed out, there are some logistical things that we need to do to organise them, securing space, hiring the space at shopping centres and the like. And then, of course, there's notification to the residents, which includes, in addition to the social media advertising, there's physical letterbox drops to the neighbourhood that is having the mobile office. We certainly can look maybe in the next term of council to maybe increase it, but perhaps for this term we're suggesting that we just go with May and July.
Can I also raise, Councillor, as we're all aware, there's a council election on the 4th of September, so possibly having monthly officers may be seen not in a good light, might be seen as abusing council's resources, and that was a fellow colleague's suggestion and I have to agree.
Mayor, just on that point, what I was going to raise, our policy states that councillors can't be on social media, can't be promoted on social media,
That's
so
right.
they'll knock that out. And the policy 6 months before,
That's right.
I think this would be in breach of that
Yeah.
policy, so I
Yeah.
don't believe we should be holding them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, next item is in Councillor Chitty's name on page 2.
I'm happy with that response.
That's
sort of.
great. Councillor
really.
Chitty 277.
Thanks. In the response, the response is the development of a climate action plan, and something I voted against, is likely to include. And then it says there, down the bottom, however, until funding opportunities such as grants, cost savings are further explored, it may not be possible to identify the cost to the ratepayers. 2 questions. Likely, should this not be a must for something new going out? And the second one is, will this come to council before we identify the costs to the ratepayers?
I'll ask the CEO to
Thank you.
respond.
Mr. Aitar.
Through the CEO, thank you, Councillor, for the question. The likelihood can be taken out, but the point I guess this was trying to make is that a lot of the actions that that aim to address climate risk are already in place at the moment. So this decision of council about a climate action plan was about bringing together in a consolidated way all those actions that work towards mitigating and addressing climate risk. But the other point is we are bringing, this will form a part of a workshop in May. It will be environment themed workshop where climate action plan will be discussed, and absolutely it'll go to council before we go out to exhibition. So that'll be the process in terms of engaging with the broader community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question?
I have a question on that one
Yes,
before we
Councillor
move
Shelton.
on. Yeah, for a balanced approach, can we also talk about the cost of not doing anything in this context?
Thank you. Question 15, Councillor Chitty.
That's next month, Mayor, that's fine.
Yep,
One after is fine.
yep.
One after that is fine.
Yep. Page 281.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Next one, Councillor Caliander, on page 282.
That's fine for the moment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Caliander's on the next one.
Yep, as is that one. I'll wait for the response.
Thank you. Councillor Haggerty on question 21. Happy? Question 22, Councillor Chitty.
That's fine.
Yep. Question 23.
Okay, this one.
Okay.
Now, I understand it also says in there that we'll receive something for next month, similar to what we discussed in the options paper earlier. This one is maybe just a little bit different. There's currently a new zoning without a precinct plan. So we can forget about the old zoning. So if you're a rural resident out there with a vacant block of land, currently you can't submit a DA for a house because there's a new zoning and that zoning won't permit it. So you end up with a vacant block of land. Under the current zoning, things like landscape supplies, for example, is permitted, but because there's no precinct plan, you can't submit a DA. Is that correct?
Sorry, through the CEO, that it's quite complex in relation to this, so we will actually provide a detailed response to council.
Can I just ask you, Councillor Chitty, you have put the question in, it has said that it'll be provided to 28th of April.
I did that and I thank staff and everything else, but that was
You've
because...
got extra bits to your question, is that it?
We had some discussions earlier and I put this on hoping that I'd have some answers for here because they weren't able to meet. Where I'm getting at the moment is, if there's a person that's currently running storing 4 trucks, for example, out in the new zoning, which would be permissible with a DA and everything else, a resident complains, send out a officer, which they do, they get a proposed order to remove those. If not, they get served an order. If you look at the zoning map, it says it's permissible. Now, we're stuck in between a rock and a hard place because ordinarily, if you've got unauthorised works in a zone that permits it, you'd put a building certificate in and see if it gets approved. Now, everyone now, again, is in pretty much no man's land where you can't build a house, you can't keep a truck there, you've got aeroplanes that are going to fly over there, and we're worried about a few trucks that might make noise. During COVID, we gave discretion to our officers, compliance officers, to say if there was no danger, there was no issues, pretty much leave those people alone. Can we apply the same discretion for the landowners in that zoning where they're pretty much just stuck?
As I've just said, Councillor, the response will be provided on 28th of April 2021, and I'm sure they'll take that question on board. Because it's not reasonable to ask staff to answer this question on the fly. Thank you. But I'm sure they will take it all on board. Councillor, your next question, drainage.
That one is pretty straightforward, and I'd just be interesting if I can add on to that. A motion was moved 12, 14 months ago by myself after the last rain event that we had, and the motion stated in part to clear out all the drainage channels. In addition to the response for this one, can I ask if that was done?
Okay, well that will come with your answer. Next one, consultants.
Thank you for the response. I don't believe there was one part that was not answered if I read the response correctly, and that was when it was first known that the consultancy work would be needed. Now, we got a list, I think yesterday, today, of all the consultants and where it was going and everything else, but I'm sure, and if I'm wrong, I stand to be corrected, but I don't think it listed when we knew about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes, can you turn off your mic? Presentation of councillors. Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly on a presentation you allowed from Councillor Haggerty last council meeting where you pretty much said, listen, let's leave it $150 for the donation, and there was a challenge put out for Councillor Haggerty for the run down at the park.
Oh, yes.
Mayor, I think we need you again. Councillor Haggerty did not show up, so I think you should choose a charity and ask Councillor Haggerty to make that donation. As you know, a month has passed. I am getting old. My legs sort of don't work as well as they did last month, where Councillor Haggerty is still young. So by default, I win. He needs to make a donation. You can choose. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Do you want me to read out your text messages?
No, I don't think we'll vote on that. Okay. All right. The next thing on the books is a motion, parking on verges and nature strips, as moved by Councillor Rhodes.
Yes, Madam Mayor, there's a couple of amendments that I need to make to that further to the CEO's comment. I think we have that. So following the further discussions with the Transport New South Wales, where it is possible to establish parking areas on verges with nature strips, where safe to do so in accordance with the New South Wales Road Rule 197, then prepare a report back to Council by June 2021. That A, identifies all streets in the Liverpool LGA where parking on the verge and nature strips can be safely permitted. Identifies time it would take to implement and time and cost to implement, and cost to appropriately signpost or paint, I think, roads indicating where such parking is permissible. Cease immediately any parking fines. I don't think that we do parking fines for people anymore in this, but I thought that we should...
Yes, we do.
We do?
We do.
Well, cease immediately any parking fines for vehicles parked on verges or nature strips, as long as they do so safely and in accordance with the requirements of Road Rule 197, until Council has completed all necessary reports. And that's it. Take out D.
Thank you. I just have a question from the Chair to somebody through the CEO. It's my understanding that if you are going to do parking areas on verges and nature strips, you would actually have to create them. It wouldn't be just go park your car in the middle of the green patch. Would that be correct or incorrect?
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely correct. What I would suggest in relation to this motion, where it says following further discussions with Transport where it is possible to establish parking areas on verges and nature strips where safe to do so, remove with New South Wales Road Rule 197, because that road rule says you are not allowed to park on nature strips or verges.
Yep.
However, the technical direction from RMS, and it's got this long name, says that Council can identify areas, signpost them properly, potentially seal them so it is safe.
They're like little parking bays.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the only other point that the General Counsel might want to comment on as well is point C. If somebody is unlawfully parking on a verge or nature strip and we haven't signposted it, it is illegal.
Yep.
And so I think it would be useful to the Council to get some advice on the legality of that point, directing the CEO to not issue fines where somebody is unlawfully parking, although I do note it does say as long as it's done safely in accordance with... So my recommendation for C, and we'd need some legal advice, but where it also says in accordance with Road Rule 197, that would need to be removed, because Road Rule 197, as I said earlier, does not allow you to park on nature strips. It would have to be in accordance with the technical direction. But if I can just also add that Council has adopted a policy position back at the end of 2019.
That was my next comment.
Correct. And so we are prioritising streets where we can do indented parking bays. The Traffic Committee did look at this a few months ago. The design team is looking into the designs for the prioritised streets that the Traffic Committee has identified. Council has allocated $200,000 in this budget to construct, and it's up to Council ultimately in relation to the budget provision for next year and future years to continue that program. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, but I'll ask through the CEO, that previous motion in 2019, because I do remember it quite distinctly, did that include verges?
It included, so it was the verge, the nature strip
It was
between
everything.
the
So it's very similar,
footpath
wasn't
and
it,
the
to
road.
this? So we've already agreed to do this
Correct.
action. That's why I'm asking as the chair.
And can we have the report back in June then?
Okay, well, that might be the best thing. I think the council reports back in June 2021 of the progress of the motion 2019 surrounding parking on verges and on road, on verges and nature strips. That might be the way to go.
And can we have the actual design that you're talking about? You're saying that it has to be specifically done?
Yeah.
We would need to have a look at that.
Well,
So-
they're legal requirements, councillors, so I appreciate you looking, but there might be much you can do.
Well, I just wanted the councillors to be advised so that
Yeah.
we can see what's going
Well,
on.
that was discussed in 2019 at great length. I remember we were at a strategic panel meeting and it came to council. But anyway,
When was that, Madam Mayor?
in 2019,
Yeah, okay.
Because that
Well,
was
it's
go-
about
going
time then
last-
that we have the report come
because
back.
I
If-
remember quite distinctly this matter being dealt with before. But yep, so I think just having the motion that says bring back a report relating to the progress of the 2019 motions surrounding the parking of on verges and on nature strips, and get rid of the rest. So that will take care of Councillor Rhodes's motion, but make sure it still stays on the book.
Madam Mayor, it's my motion.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying I'm going to rule it out of order because it's already on the books. So do you want something that says bring back a report showing the progress of the policy adopted in 2019, because you're adopting the same policy again?
And can we, what about the cost and implementation of the signpost? Is that going
Well,
to
that'll be part of it. That has to be under law.
under the law? So we will get that. Can you tell me, Madam Mayor, what we will get in this report? Perhaps that would be the best way for us to go.
We'll get back a progress report on what happened in 2019, and we heard from Mr Smith there's an allocation of $200,000 towards this, and some streets have been identified. You're looking at streets across the whole LGA. So you can't just sort of get up tomorrow morning and point to a street and say, we'll do that one. It has to be looked at in a, I suppose, in a fairly scientific way, but also in a resource way as well. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just saying this has gone through the council before, has been adopted before, and I think it's quite sensible to ask for a progress report at this point of time because it's still an urgent issue. I'm not trying to demean it in any way. Okay.
Can we see the rest of the motion again, please?
There it is. Bring back a report on the progress of the policy from 2019 relating to verge parking by June 2021, including information of costs, appropriate signage, posting or painting of roads.
Mayor, I'd like
Mayor, can I
to
ask-
speak in favour of this motion. As the person who brought the 2019 report to council, I have been keeping an eye on it, but I think, yeah, I'm happy for a report to come to the full council to see how it's going. I know I regularly, I won't say harass, but send emails through to Charles going, here's another one, here's a spot for another one, and it has come to the traffic committee. But it's something that people do bring up on a regular basis, not just with myself, obviously with Councillor Rhodes. So let's get a report on how this is going.
So are you seconding the motion?
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
And
Question, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Hitchity.
Sorry, I just got a minty. During and until this report comes back during COVID again, we showed discretion on verges. Does anything stop us doing that again until this report comes back?
Sorry, I can't hear mintying. Try again. Sorry.
At least I'm not watching maths.
I know.
Which is all right. During COVID, we showed discretion on
Yep.
parking on verges.
Yep.
Until this report comes back, are we able to move the same?
I'll ask the CEO. Mr Smith.
Thank you. I'll answer the first part and then I'll have Ms Chennell answer the second part. Council staff do show discretion in relation to this matter. If we get complaints about parking on verges, we go out and investigate to determine whether or not that is occurring. We then send education letters out to the community we give them a certain amount of time to respond appropriately. And if we still get complaints, we go back out and issue infringements. But in relation to Council directing the CEO for an enforcement officer to show discretion, Ms Channell, do you want to provide some advice from that perspective?
Thank you, Mr Smith. Through the CEO. In my view, this is different to what was put in place for COVID. That was a pandemic, and that was about obviously using discretion, which Mr Smith has already said his staff do, and I've witnessed that myself. This is about, not in terms of the pandemic, this is, in my view, a complete operational issue on whether compliance officers issue infringements, again, on what they base as being unsafe in an area in which it is illegal to park.
Thank you. Thank you.
So do our, sorry, just one further question. Do our rangers work at 10:46 a.m. on a Sunday morning? Don't need to answer that. I think everyone gets the gist.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, we have a mover and a second. Any opposition? I'll put it. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item is in the name of, I'll turn the page.
Looking forward to this one.
I'll get there, I've just got to get into my own. 301.
Yes, Madam Mayor, it's a motion that I put up.
Yep.
Having discussions with my fellow councillors and council staff. Happy to change the motion to, and I think it'll come up on the screen now. What we need on this is everybody to agree. So it's wrong to put in actual stipulations, and we need to hold a workshop and actually everybody get to contribute and discuss what they feel would be good, because once we do this, it's not only us as councils, as a council that has to agree to it, we also need to get the other growth centres to agree to it as well, to have any sort of impact on changing things. So that's the motion as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. Will you second up?
Can I ask for something to be put into that, and then
Wait a
possibly
minute.
second?
Can I just get a second? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Judy, what was that?
Mayor, I'm sure it's during, or yourself, we've previously held forums for stakeholders, which I believe were at the Powerhouse, where applicants that were doing these major works out in growth areas would meet with council staff. I think it was called, and I'm sure you held a couple of them, developers forums.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously then stopped. Question through yourself or the CEO, what was the benefit, and is there benefit to keep holding these or to hold those ones again?
I'll ask the CEO to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there's always a benefit to be derived from stakeholder engagement. But a lot of that depends on how that engagement is framed and setting out clear objectives for that.
Okay, so and this is not debating the motion just yet, just to work out if another point is needed. What I'm hearing from the main stakeholders that are obviously rolling out all this land is they want to work closer with council to be able to deliver council's vision, which is obviously the LEP. They're not asking for anything, increase in heights, densities, whatever it is within the current framework. They want to work with council so that there's a win-win. They can do what they need to do, and council gets to roll out its drainage channels, its parks, and everything else. They're pretty much now calling for that to happen again. Not one where it's each individual person saying, my DA is this and my DA is that. Absolutely will go nowhere, to be a waste of time. It'll be more, this is what we need to deliver over the next 10 years in these growth areas. You're doing this, we're doing that. How can we align those two to ensure that we can deliver a better outcome, ultimately, for the person that pays for that house and land out in those growth areas? Do you need that as part of the motion to get that going again? You're happy to take that on board? And if you are, how soon can we have one of these happening?
I'd ask the CEO to make a comment.
I'm happy that would be added to the motion, and we'll look at that and see how quickly it can be organised.
So we're currently pretty much in April. Can we have one is mid-May a good time frame?
I'll take that on notice.
Thank you.
Councillor.
That's fine.
I'm just very conscious, and I've just indicated to the Mayor we're coming into a period of intense planning around budgets and all the rest of it, and everyone has to contribute to those processes. It's going to be pretty tight going, but we'll do our absolute best.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, any opposition? I'll put it those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item is Western City Deal in the name of Councillor Shelton, Councillor Rhodes and Councillor Chitty.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the motion as it appears in the book. I'll speak to it if I have to.
Thank you. Seconder?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Can I make a constructive suggestion? Why don't we put something in, say, the annual report or that other report with the traffic lights on it, whose name I can't remember, but no one knows what I'm doing. The one that you and me put feedback in, Tony, Councillor Hachidi. No, you don't remember that one? It was a report and it had how council was tracking on things, and I think it had traffic lights, and we worked on it with Andrew Stevenson to improve it. Anyway, can we find an appropriate report to put this in? So rather than just have a standalone document, why don't we just include it in our, say, our annual report process or some other annual process that we do that says this and this is happening, and then 1 or 2 pages on here's what Liverpool has and hasn't got out of the city deal this year.
Mayor, I'd be saying that given that Councillor Haggerty can't even name the report, we probably don't see it, so I'll stick with what we got.
Or the annual report.
Okay, we have a mover and I'll be a second. We've sort of had someone talk almost against it. Did you want to speak to your motion, Councillor Shelton?
Well, there's been no other discussion in relation to it, so it can stand as it is. Except that I note in relation to the CEO's comments, it's got at the last paragraph on page 2, Council has a rigorous monitoring and reporting system in place for the city deal commitments that Liverpool is involved in. This includes regular reports to the executive team, delivery office, Western Parklands Council, and so on and so forth. Doesn't include the councillors. So the upshot is yeah, and I don't think those words have got included, so it still finishes at city deal.
Okay, thank you. Is there any opposition? I'll put it those in favour, those against, declare it carried. Next item's in the name of Councillor Calianda.
Can we have the...
That the council develop a formal system...
It ends at city deal.
Full stop. Those other words didn't...
You don't want the other one. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'll put it again. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. What's mocha? That looks interesting. Thank you, typist. Okay, the next item is racism not welcome in the name of Councillor Calianda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think in speaking with my colleagues that there is broad sort of agreement with the sentiment of this notice of motion, and, you know, as a council, I note the CEO's comments that we have and continue to do a broad range of things in this area. And I do acknowledge the work of staff in what they have done and the initiatives that they are continuing to put together. And so my intention with this is not to reinvent the wheel or not to kind of double up on things that we're already doing, but obviously endorse this particular campaign and the sentiments around it. I note that it's also been unanimously endorsed by the New South Wales Parliament across the board, that you know, that we do live in a multicultural society where everyone should be treated with respect and equality. And like I said, I think we broadly agree with that sentiment, and it's, I guess, the only things to sort of come back is to use the expertise of staff in this space to identify where we would like to kind of have visible indicators of this campaign and what that would cost us as a council. And, you know, once we have that information before us, we can sort of proceed from there.
If the councillor has moved it, I'm happy to second it. I don't know if she...
Okay, that's moved and it's seconded.
Mayor, I'll speak against part of the recommendation.
Yes, councillor.
Or the motion. And I thank Councillor Cunningham for the discussion that we had, and the sediments absolutely are there. What concerns me, first of all, and it's great the New South Wales Parliament endorse it, they do what they do, we do what we do. In relation to this, my only concern, or I do have a few concerns. Firstly, I don't believe that our community is a racist community. I don't see people out there being racist towards each other. I'm not sure if I'm living under a rock or something, but it's just something that I have not experienced it. Have I been, growing up, been called a wog, but I've loved it. That's what I am. That's how we grew up as kids, and it was wogs against skips. It was just the way it was, whether it was in the school playground, at the station. That's just how myself, and I'm a lot older than some, including yourself, Mayor, I'm a lot older than yourself, grew up. Now, we then come and say we need to bring in a policy to this local government area. Does that mean then, are we then saying that we do have a problem and we need to now work on this problem by bringing in a policy? Now, point 3, which really concerns me and disturbs me, is identify locations for street signage within our LGA, and it was something that we discussed over the phone. Imagine driving into your street and seeing a sign that says, whatever the sign says, racism, not welcome. I mean, the stigma that's attached with such a sign, does that mean then I've got to work out which house in that street is being accused or is racist? I do have an issue with that stigma that will be attached, and I know Councillor Haggerty is now sort of thinking, what the hell's he going on about? But it will have a stigma attached to it. We had a stigma attached once with nothing to do with racism, for example, Speed Street, where we said we'd change the name. But instead of changing the name, we fixed the footpaths, we did everything, we tried to make it look good because that was a high turnover area, and for a long time. I think there are other ways, if you need to address the issue and identify that we do have an issue, of doing it without putting a sign where someone could be driving through the LGA or someone could be coming and visit you from another LGA, sees a sign that says racism not welcome, and then they say, gee, have you got a racism problem in this area? And I just think a sign, I just can't support that. And I can't support the fact of doing something and highlighting something where I don't believe we actually have that issue in this area. If we do have an issue, let's work on it. But putting up signs, I don't think will solve anyone's issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion?
Yeah, I'll speak for it. Late, I think he was a senator, US Senator, John Lewis, he said, democracy is an act, not a state. And I think advocating against racism is similar. It's not racism is solved. Let's pack up and go home. We are a multicultural community. For the most part, we do get along very, very well. I was at a Harmony dinner on Thursday, and it's probably one of the best times I've had in about 12 months, except for the Saturday before I was at the Premier's Harmony dinner, which again was one of the best times I've had in about 12 months. Had people from different cultures and religions, and everyone was happy to see each other after 12 months of being locked down. But we have to actively and continually work to keep that state. It's not you've reached the finish line and it's over. So in the same way that John Lewis said that democracy is an act, not a state, what he meant by that was, in the US, you don't, they are just the world's greatest democracy and you pack up. You've got to continually, you've got to do things and you've got to say things and you've got to push policies to maintain that. And as I said, racism is the same. So I think this is about, continuing to have that conversation and calling it out and maintain the community that we have in Liverpool, which is one which is tolerant, and we have a lot of initiatives around that. And this is simply a way of adding to it. In relation to the signs, I don't know if I entirely agree, but I guess are we actually saying in this motion that we want signs that say racism not welcome? Potentially we're saying we want signs that support that campaign, but they don't necessarily need to say racism not welcome. I note that we had Harmony Day a couple of weeks ago, and the reason it's called Harmony Day is because the Prime Minister at the time, John Howard, didn't want to call it what it was, which was the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Hatred. So perhaps can we do something along these lines where we express that sentiment, but in a way that, unanimously Council can agree that what we're effectively saying is racism's not welcome and that we're a multicultural society and we respect everyone's cultures and beliefs.
Mayor, if I may, and I've had a go, but that was the point of discussion that we had. Why not have proud multicultural community or something along those lines? Like just racism not welcome has a stigma attached to it. Let's promote the good things. Let's sell positive messages instead of a negative, which I think then will create I think it'll unwind what you're actually trying to do.
I take your point, Councillor. I think what the issue is there, I think it's more that's the campaign, not the signage. But I do agree with you. Whatever signage goes up has to be in a positive light, not in a negative light. And I think that would be the intention of the councillor. Yes, Councillor Caliander, it's your motion.
Can I just clarify? I think it's easier to deal with difficult topics when they're presented in a positive light, and it's also easier to ignore confronting topics when they're presented in a positive light, in that, we pride ourselves on being a multicultural country. We pride ourselves on having people from all walks of life. I'm not sure if the CEO's comment went out to everyone, but the research shows that incidents of racial vilification and attacks, particularly towards people of Asian descent, rose sharply in 2020, most likely as a consequence of, the virus, the COVID-19's origins being from China. Racism is one of those experiences that people generally don't tend to yell from the rooftops because the shame is usually transferred onto the person who experiences it rather than the perpetrator. So it's not surprising that these are not conversations that are being had commonly across the board, because the victims of racism are most likely to kind of hide that aspect and kind of present a positive face to those around them. So emphasising that we do want that aspect of our community to be something that we're proud of, I think is a really is a really good thing, and we do that in a number of ways, as outlined in the CEO's comment. And like I said before, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or try and do things that we already do, but because this is something that's on the rise, we do need to have challenging conversations with people about it. And sometimes the way to do that is to kind of acknowledge and own that this is a problem. This has been rising in the last 12 months, and taking the same old approach to just saying, yep, we're multicultural, we're all harmonious, we all live, in a society where this doesn't happen, I think is sticking our heads in the sand a little bit. And it's not likely to kind of change the status quo, which is what we're trying to do here.
Mayor, can we go into committee of a whole?
We can move this question into
Please.
Confidential session.
No. Oh, sorry, that other one where there's no rules and we can talk as
That's
many...
committee of the whole.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay. Yeah, I'll move
Just so that we're not then...
We can move into the committee of the whole. So meeting procedure
Madam
doesn't
Mayor.
prevail.
Madam Mayor.
Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Hall.
I would like to speak against it.
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to speak against this on the basis that I think it's reverse discrimination. You're attracting attention to something that may not exist. I object to looking at signs which tells me that I'm supposed to watch what I say. It may be regarded as racism, particularly signs in areas where people will perceive that as being a problematic area. I do not believe we need to advertise this in any way. Or what you're really doing is saying there are members of our community that are racists. There may very well be. But that is, we have certain freedoms. We are entitled to opinions and our thoughts. And whether or not people like those or not, that's an infringement, I believe, on freedom of speech. Not that I would ever say anything against anybody of any other race. I'm German, I'm European. When I came out here, as a little kid, I was called a kraut, a squarehead, and all of those things. Italians were called wogs and dagos, and Polish, and the same. And it never hurt me. Grow a thicker skin. Gee, when do we think that we have to impose our views on everybody else? I think it's entirely wrong. I think we should not do this. Harmony Day is something we should celebrate, but this is the very opposite of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Did, your turn.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, look, can I move amendment to this motion?
Well, it depends on whether the mover and the seconder accept it, but what is it?
Okay, it's just keep number 1 and 2, eliminate 3 and 4 and 5. And instead of promoting, instead of erecting
I think
signs against racism, we can erect a signs promote harmony, peace and multiculturalism.
Can I suggest that you keep 5 because there is a local government group that exists that works on these issues, so it would be, I think, prudent to be involved in that group only if it's helping solve problems in other LGAs, but also you can pick up lots of information. So you don't want to isolate yourself. Yeah, so, yeah. I put 3 in, I put 5 in as 3, I think. What does the mover and the seconder feel?
The way I read it, 3 and 4 was not saying we're putting up it didn't lock us into a racism thing, but it's the mover's decision.
Councillor Calienda, what is your decision?
Madam Mayor, go on, sorry.
Wait a minute. You're thinking? Okay, Councillor Rhodes.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, when you look at it, I'm tending to agree that, and if it would stop moving, there it is, that racism not welcome is definitely a negative.
And that's the campaign name.
Yes, I know. Yeah. I know it's the campaign. It's a pity they didn't call it that multiculturalism is welcome or something like that. I'm not really keen because of the negativity involved in it. If it was under a different name and trying to do the same thing, I would be more inclined to agree with it. But I am very afraid that it is negative and we don't need that sort of negativity in Liverpool. We've got to make it positive.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to, oh, sorry, yeah, or, no, can we change all no smoking signs to say breathe cleaner air?
Okay, thank you for your interest.
Just get rid of them.
Councillor Ayar.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been thrown out today, but I have to say I've been a victim of racism many a time here in Liverpool. One constituent asked me what religion I was. When I replied I'm Muslim, she said, "Wow, you're too pretty to be a Muslim." I also, a couple of years back, was given a letter that was received by a resident, and it was a letter. It was basically political material that this resident had received from an MP who had served our community for 30 years in state and federal parliament. Mm. And in this letter, it indicated that my husband is of Lebanese, American, Shia ancestry. Mm-hmm. Now, for people that don't know what Shia means he's from a specific sect of Islam. And it was very, very disheartening. I mean, if I ever spoke of this person, I wouldn't say that this person was of white descent or Irish descent or Scottish descent or anything to the likes of that. So if it's being used by our leaders and people that represent our community, that directly shows our community that it's okay to be racist. It's okay to point the finger and say that person's a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, an atheist. And it's a racism is very broad because it falls under the lining of prejudice as well. Look, it's a very sensitive issue for myself. I do like the twist on turning it into a positive campaign, but I don't believe it should be on streets as places where these kind of things belong, which are schools, preschools, shopping centres, TAFEs, universities, and really tolerance, I think, is something that's taught at home and from close family and friends. So it's on parents and educators to educate their children and those around them that everybody belongs and we're all Australian, and the finger should never be pointed. While we're on this subject, as everyone's aware, I have 3 children. 2 of my children are named Solomon and Jacob, named after great prophets. Hopefully they'll live up to their name. I've had people say to me, how come your kids' names are Solomon and Jacob? Are you Christian? Or I've had the finger pointed at me to say, you're a Jew because your kids' names are Solomon and Jacob. Actually, no, I'm none of the above. So it's very, very disheartening that people are labelled. And my kids have very universal names, but I'm still labelled. This is racism, and it's happened to me right here at home in Liverpool. So I think something does need to be done about it. It's completely unacceptable. And 100%, it starts at the top. It starts with the government doing something, namely the federal and the state government, and our MPs doing something about it and speaking up against it, not our MPs sending letters out that state that someone is a Lebanese, Muslim, American, Shiite, or whatever the hell they said, because they actually forgot to mention that we're also Roman and there's some English blood in our lines as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure.
Given what he said, sorry, Madam Messler, given what he said now, so should we erect signs in the Parliament, in the State and Federal Parliament?
I'm actually happy to, if councillors are interested in seeing this letter, I'm happy to send it around to them. I've actually got a copy of it on my phone. I didn't really want to make a big deal about it because I didn't want to give it attention or give it any oxygen, but the truth of the matter is it does have to be given oxygen, and we need to stop racism in the community. I mean, I think racism is something that's taught. Children aren't born racist.
Mayor,
yes, Councillor.
In relation, apologies, I do need to correct you on one thing. The signs are racism not welcome. The campaign is called that.
The campaign, my understanding is the campaign is called Racism Not Welcome. I don't think, I'm about to ask Councillor Caliander whether the signage says that.
Page 4 of the CEO's comments, installation of racism not welcome signages, and the discussion that I had with Councillor Caliander was the wording. In relation to Councillor Caliander's point, going to the university in relation to the Chinese has risen sharply, of Asian descent, possible, but we're here to represent Liverpool and the best interests of our residents. And if it's something that we're not seeing, yes, I take on board the study. But if it's not happening in our area...
I hate to tell you though, Councillor, it is. I've encountered it too.
Madam Mayor, I think we all, and it's not acceptable no matter where you go, and we'll all have different opinions on this. Again, I'll go to the other point. I love being called a wog because I just do. And I don't take offence to that whatsoever. I'm very careful of what I call other people because I know, depending on the person, I've got to be careful and not cross any lines with that person because people are. But we saw just recently when we start campaigns like this, we saw a school in Melbourne the other day where the principal stood up without any notice, said to all the boys, stand up and say sorry to the girls. Now that's, this is, are we trying to promote good things here, or we always got to look at the negatives? Now that principal was slammed by even the Victorian government to say that was the wrong thing to do, and parents complained, boys, girls and everybody else. But the more we look at negatives, the more people think we are a racist, and then people start doing things that, they shouldn't be doing. And I just don't agree. I haven't even seen this campaign and what it involves. Yes, join a anti-racism working group, absolutely. If there's a group there and we can learn more things, let's do it. But we're endorsing something we don't know much about. We're going to put up signs that says racism not welcome. No matter which way you shape it, form it, except for number 3, I'm going to have my name happily recorded against it.
Thank you. Councillor Caliander, you have the right to reply. I'm closing down the debate.
Sure, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think going back to what I said initially, this is about acknowledging that, over the last 12 months, there has been an increasing incidence of racism in our community more broadly. I think at the last council meeting, I outlined a situation where it was directed at myself over the internet. And I think, like I was saying before, trying to do the same thing repeatedly and wondering why it's not working is a waste of council's resources, and it's a waste of time, frankly. If the goal here is to address an issue in the community, we've got to own it. Now, the example that you provided of a school principal doing whatever in Melbourne, that was on them. They did that off their own bat, and that's a different situation. It's a bit of a slippery slope argument to say, if you pass this, then something like that will occur. That's not what's being suggested here, and that's not what will go out and happen within the community if that happens. I think, like I said, if there is broad agreement in terms of the sentiment, however, there is a little bit of leeway in terms of how this campaign is actually rolled out in our community more specifically, perhaps replacing the 3 and 4 in the motion as it stands to read. So if you can add a 4, yep. Bring back a report to council with recommendations on how the campaign can be implemented within Liverpool.
Can I suggest a further amendment?
It's up to the mover. Go ahead.
Is that okay?
It should be closed debate, I have to say, Councillor, but...
All right. Well, rather say endorse and become a member of the Racism Not Welcome campaign, can we say bring back further information about the Racism Not Welcome campaign so that we can find out a little bit more about it? No, get rid of the word endorse until we can find out what is actually in what it contains.
So delete 2 and have
No,
1,
not delete
2,
2.
3. Yeah.
No problem with number 3. Number 1, investigate allegations of recent. Yeah.
I think, Councillor, just leave it as it is. We have a report coming back to Council that looks at how this Racism Not Welcome campaign can be implemented in the Council.
Point of order, Mayor, on point 1.
Yep.
We're being asked to endorse or to adopt something that says, note the recent alarming rise of racism in our community. Can we be provided, before we can vote on it, can we be provided, where did that come from, where is it, where are the figures? Because
well, the ABC has had a lot of reports recently on it.
Sorry, Mayor, I'm making a point of order. And I'm asking,
all right, I'll rule on your point of order. What is it?
Point 1 is out of order due to the fact that there's nothing in front of us that actually says there's an alarming rise of racism in our community. And now, Madam Mayor, I don't think any newspaper report, whether it's ABC, Herald, Telegraph or whatnot, is something that I think this council should be considering.
Well, it's.
So,
I'm not going to uphold your point of order because it's actually 4 corners, but this is the motion put by Councillor Caliander. She's not willing to take number 1 out, so it's her motion, Councillor, and that's coming from a different perspective. She's moved the motion around to take on board people's concerns and information. She's had her right of reply. We are now going to vote. Councillors, Please could you resume your seat so we could vote? Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. The motion's carried. Next item is... Oh, if you wish. All right. Those in favour, please stand. Okay. Those against, please stand. It's lost. Thank you. All right, now the next items are confidential items. Yes, certainly. Councillor Hull wants his name recorded against that motion.
And mine as well.
Well, it's in the division, so
Okay.
it gets written down. Okay. What I'm going to do, because I'm conscious that we have an urgency motion in this particular confidential items, I am going to move into confidential session under section 10A2DI and section 10A2A so that we can consider the confidential items, so the members of the public at this point need to leave the meeting. We'll have a 5-minute break and we'll resume at 9:30. Denham Court Road, Denham Court, for the price and terms outlined in this report. 2, we authorise the CEO or his delegate officer to execute any document under the power of attorney necessary to give effect to this decision. 3, resolves to classify the part of Lot 141 in DP 852633 to be acquired as operational land in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. And 4, keeps confidential this report pursuant to section 10A2C of the Local Government Act, as this information would, if disclosed, confer a commercial advantage on persons with whom the Council is conducting purposes of business. Confo 2, the Council approves the deed of settlement and releases associated with the dedication of Lot 39 in DP 1160527, Lot 39, Swaffer Avenue, Middleton Grange, on the terms outlined in this confidential report, authorises the CEO or their delegate officer to execute a deed of settlement and release of any document under the power of attorney necessary to give effect to the decision of item 1 above. And 3, keeps confidential this report pursuant to provisions of section 10A2C of the Local Government Act 1993, as this information would, if disclosed, confer a commercial advantage on a person with whom Council is conducting businesses or purposes to conduct business. Confo 3, Council resolved to note the inspection reports by the Fire and Rescue New South Wales as shown in Attached 1 and Attached 2, and exercise its power to issue fire safety orders as recommended by Council's Fire Safety Officer to address the identified fire safety deficiencies. Got to go through to the next one. Gosh, there's a lot of things there. Sorry, guys. Confo 4, Council resolved that they appoint the following representatives to the Environment Advisory Committee in accordance with the terms of reference in the Charter: Ms Stacey Benfield, Mr Stephen Dober-Brown, Ms Rosalind Faddy, Ms Edley Robinson, Mr Joseph Rover, Mr Olson Samuel, Mr Robert Story, Mr Joseph Tharrable, Ms Signe Westerberg, Mr George Youssef. In industry membership, the Georges Riverkeeper, Mr Richard Dixon, and environmental volunteer membership, Mr Graham McLaughlin. 05, the Council resolved that Council appoints Carol North Zamazik as the additional community representative to the Tourism and CBD Committee. 06, the Council resolved that the Council provides direction on a position to enter into partnership with SYN SW to deliver preschools in Edmondson Park and Liverpool CBD, 1 in a joint partnership, option 1 for Edmondson Park, and 2 as a tender as a licensed provider, and option 2.
Mayor, before you go to the next one, can I just raise before you read it? I remember once I sent through an email stating why something that was discussed and proposed in closed session didn't appear in the minutes, and the advice that came back from George and also the Office of Local Government stated that only things that are actually resolved in closed are made public.
That's right.
Okay, so given that nothing was resolved on the next one...
It doesn't exist.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. We could say the urgency motion as put by Councillor Rhodes and seconded by... No, but I suppose we should in sense, because there was an urgency motion moved in, and we should, for transparency's sake, we should say the urgency motion as put by Councillor Rhodes and Councillor Hall was lost. And I think that would be sufficient